This is a world where magic exists. 4 continents with various species of sorcerers. The age of magic has taken over the city of Rondel, where the largest number of magicians are currently concentrated. This is how this place survived the Age of Swords and developed the most advanced magic. Although Rondel is a highly developed magical civilization, the political system is still a feudal system with kings and nobles. This means that the poor have difficulty studying alongside the rich. Even with so many problems, Rondel remains the most admired province when it comes to magic, so it received the title of Rondel's Golden Age. Everything seemed perfect until one day before the turn of the year 1999 to the year 2000, a peculiar message from an archmage left everyone distressed. He told that he hid his riches and knowledge somewhere in this world. Power can be obtained by the first one he finds. The archmage who left his treasure behind was the pioneer who took Rondel to the golden age of the magical century. He was also the Archduke of the Bring Up Empire, but known as the Sorcerer Lord Lucas since the archmage's message. All the magic apprentices went crazy to get his power, so an intense journey for the treasure began. Some rumors arose that the hideout that Lucas spoke of was in a dungeon in the arid land of dragons. The apprentices traveled all over the world looking for what was left by the Sorcerer Lord. Regardless of nationality or species, they all endeavored to find the fate of Archduke Lucas, but after several attempts no one found the place. All continents were investigated, not even a clue appeared. 20 years ago, a boy was about to leave the dungeon when he was congratulated on finding Archduke Lucas's destiny. A smile instantly opened on his face. The scene changes to the past. In the year 2007 at Lawrence Castle, the butlers wake up Prince Adrian. The little white-haired boy thanks him for his concern and says he is going to get another book. The maids are in love with the child's delicate way. This is our main character named Adrian Lawrence. He has just reincarnated in the body of Viscount Rayford Lawrence's second son. The protagonist was an army soldier in his past life and passed away in a car accident. When he opened his eyes, he was transported to Reinhardt's kingdom and took over this body. He stopped calling himself Kim, and now everyone calls him Adrian Lawrence. He went from a middle-class family to a family that owns several properties. The protagonist didn't despair much when he reincarnated because his past life experiences became a great advantage. Adrian stood out a lot in childhood because he was the smartest, while children his age were playing without thinking too much. He already did several calculations, so he received recognition from the people around him and met his father's expectations. This caused frustration in his stepmother and half-brother. Even so, the protagonist continued to study and found out about Rondel's existence. Unfortunately, the knowledge of his past life did not help much. He had never used magic or anything like that. Even so, he made an effort to continue being recognized as a genius. But one day his life turned upside down. He was poisoned when he was 7 years old and was saved by the healers who arrived in time. The Viscount was worried about his son's health and tried to find out who did it. For the protagonist, the answer was obvious. Although his stepmother posed as someone with a good heart, she could not fool Adrian. Anna Lawrence was the Viscount's official wife and consequently wanted to get rid of the protagonist and his mother. Anna felt uncomfortable when Adrian, who came from a poor lineage, began to be recognized. After a few days, the protagonist recovered and tried to get evidence to incriminate his stepmother, but he didn't find it. Nothing, besides no one suspected the official wife, not even Viscount Rayford. Adrian decided to leave the path of genius aside to lose everyone's attention and ensure his safety. 10 years pass. On May 1st, 2019, the protagonist was already 20 years old. He walked normally through cities outside the kingdom. People were in shock when they saw Viscount Lawrence's second son walking around without worries. In addition, Adrian dressed in ordinary clothes. The attendants were excited to serve him. The protagonist bought all the Chronicle cards online. The saleswoman delivered the order, and he thanked her for the service. After the protagonist leaves the store, the attendants talk about him. Adrian made a point of visiting convenience stores instead of sending subordinates. Everyone who worked in the city was delighted with this. The attendant told his colleague that Adrian came at least 2 to 3 times a month. He seems to like games a lot and always buys those cards. Even the protagonist is shocked to spend 5 million won on gambling. At that moment, he is taken out of his thoughts. The guard warns that he received a call about Cedric's visit to his house. The scene changes to a few minutes later. The protagonist's mother, named Sylvia Lawrence, welcomes her son. Adrian's half-brother complains that he is going around without an official vehicle. The protagonist curses Cedric mentally. The half-brother says that he should think about the family's reputation. The discussion goes on for a few minutes. Adrian decides not to contradict his brother because he wants to end the matter soon, so he warns that Cedric is right and apologizes. The brother doesn't miss the opportunity to call the protagonist an illegitimate commoner, but Adrian doesn't even care and asks what the guy came to his house to do. Cedric brags that their father is planning to make him take over a business. Adrian is not surprised. Rondel's noble families are involved in several companies. Probably Cedric will take over the Fars distribution, which is the source of money for the mining industry, one of the businesses run by the Lawrence family. The protagonist understands why Cedric came here. He congratulates his brother and asks him to leave his house. But before he shows the purchases he made today, Cedric laughs, realizing that he spent money on gambling. Thanks to this, his brother leaves. His mother worries about Adrian, but the protagonist warns that keeping this type of person away is the best choice. He has isolated himself since the poisoning incident. His image as a genius has been erased, and the protagonist has avoided contact with vassals. The Viscount did not worry about him, probably because Adrian is the son of a concubina. The protagonist was not sad about his father's attitude. Thanks to this, his life was never put at risk again. So Adrian lived 10 years annulling his presence. As soon as he graduated, he left the castle with his mother. There were some rumors saying that he was no longer a genius and now he was addicted to games. Most of these rumors were spread by the castle servants under the influence of the official wife. Anna always wanted Cedric to stand out and was happy when no one else commented on Adrian. Now the protagonist can say that he lives happier only with his mother. At that moment, he goes back to the room and puts on the virtual reality glasses. The employees said that he spent money on games to escape reality. But this was far from the truth. Adrian clicks on the game, and an interface says that Chronicle Online is being connected. The character has been synchronized with his real body. His virtual actions result in changes in real life. 10 years ago, the protagonist was studying at the academy when he first heard about Archduke Lucas. He researched about the Archmage and discovered a coat of arms of the Lucas family with an English word. It was strange because the protagonist was in another world that did not belong to Earth. This means that no one in that place should know languages of the human world. For a moment, Adrian thought Lucas was also a human sent from Earth to the world of magic, but decided to research before jumping to conclusions. It didn't take long for him to really realize that Archduke Lucas was from Earth. Before passing away, the Lord wrote that he wanted to walk on the beach of California with Mary once again. No one cared about those words because no resident of the magical world knew about the Earth. Consequently, he did not know some names mentioned by Lucas, but Adrian investigated thoroughly and was sure that it was not a coincidence. Rondel's Grand Archmage belonged to the human world like him. The evidence was clear that that man was a native of the Earth. Since then, Adrian used his knowledge of the land of his past life to look for the fate that Lucas left behind. In the end, he managed to find it through the online chronicle. The protagonist thought his life would improve, but he was wrong. The real suffering began after he had put his hands on fate. No one thought that fate had been hidden in an online game. Adrian was the only one to find it, but now he is going through trouble. The attacks suffered within the game causes pain in real life. Probably no one would believe it if he told it. Now the protagonist tries to finish off that damn goblin who still has 80 HP points. Fortunately, the blade passed through the enemy's head. The critical damage yielded Adrian's victory. He reached level 10 and could change jobs. Adrian was sent to another scenario after finishing the first mission of Fate. He feels that it took longer than expected because he needed to synchronize his virtual body with the real body. At that moment, a portal appears and the system asks if he wants to go to the floor of Archduke Lucas' magic tower. Adrian confirms and is teleported to a library. A chest appears in front of several bookshelves. The system notifies that he's won 5 billion coins and asks him to enter the account to receive the deposit. The protagonist is happy that he finally received a reward. The interface says that a circle was created in the virtual body. Adrian says that this is much better than money. The creation of the circle was completed. Thanks to this, the protagonist could feel the power of mana in real life. It is the first time he has this feeling. Adrian takes advantage of the fact that the first circle was created to learn a technique, but he is undecided with the amount of books in front of him. He finds Lucas impressive for thinking about something like this. Suddenly, Adrian feels a very bad headache. The system says that he learned the skill from that book. The protagonist realizes that it is enough to touch to learn any technique. The content of the books were easily acquired, but the process of engraving the principles in the head is uncomfortable and painful. The last book he absorbs is the circular concealment technique. The content is very good for those who are learning to deal with magic, but the protagonist suffered from the headache. He lies on the floor with his 3 books while saying that he just wants to live a quiet life with his mother, so he will go through any pain for it. The next day, at the training ground of the protagonist's mansion, the trusted knight named Vice says that the boy has more stamina than he thought. To be honest, it was surprising when Adrian said he wanted to train swordsmanship. The truth is that the protagonist thought that real-life training could help in the game. His stats made a good impact on reality. What makes Adrian happier is that he can use the game's skills in real life as well. Luckily, the protagonist realized in time and hid the knight's mana circle. Thanks to the hiding skill he learned in Lucas' magic tower, Vice notices that Adrian looks happier today and asks what happened. The boy replies that he got a good item in the game. The servants whisper that a pathetic knight matches a pathetic young master. Vice gets angry, and the protagonist says that everything is fine. Deep down, Adrian feels grateful that he got angry in his place, but from the beginning his plan was to be seen that way to ward off the presence of Cedric and Anna. Sometime later, the protagonist returns to the game. He confirmed that the stats reflected in real life, so he prepares to create something that will give him more money and skills in the future. The system opens the game's item store. Adrian had heard that the most important thing in this game is the money he has in his wallet. He couldn't use the shop before because he hadn't reached level 10, but now the boy made several purchases. He increased XP, bought the goddess's blessing and protection. The most important purchase came next. A supporter. The protagonist thought it would be efficient to buy a guard to help him destroy the monsters. If you choose a good support, maybe it's not money thrown away. Your hope is to get a highest class warrior to be your tank. But unfortunately, you don't have money to buy anyone from the upper class. All purchases are refused due to lack of coins. The protagonist is sad because no one shows up, even offering 30 million won. The system suggests a woman named Arshia as support. She specializes in defense and uses a protective shield called God's Shield. Adrian has never heard of this supporter before and wonders if he is a new character. Luckily, this support has a good level and status. The protagonist clicks on buy. The system warns that once registered as a supporter, the changes cannot be undone. Adrian confirms that he would like to register her. Arshia appears in front of him without an expression on his face. The protagonist chooses the next destination. A few minutes later, we can see Arshia dealing with the monsters. While Adrian uses the magic missile skill, the system notifies that the protagonist has reached level 20. He feels that he is evolving faster with the help of Arshia. Although part of the experience is sent to her, it does not make much difference in his evolution. The protagonist thinks if he should take advantage of the time he has now to practice magic, he decides that he can do it in real life. So Adrian leaves the game and says that he will rest for training later. At that moment, a light appears in his room. He looks scared, realizing that Arshia followed him, then screams, asking what the hell she is doing here. The girl says she is her support. Adrian says he knows this. He doesn't understand why she didn't stay in the game. Arshia realizes that he is worried about how she maintains her presence in reality. The protagonist also notes that she understands the difference between real life and game. Arshia explains that she is like a homunculus, but you can also call her android. Creator Lucas predetermined her appearance and combat characteristics. The protagonist understands that she is one of the legacies left by the Sorcerer Lord. He says he would have chosen a more discreet support if he knew he would have to bring it to reality. Anyway, he has nothing to do. Adrian questions if she continues with the skills in the real world. Arshia replies that yes. At the moment, her maximum stats are comparable to those of a Grandmaster. The protagonist is surprised because a Grandmaster belongs to the 8th circle. The highest rank is the 9th circle. Arshia can be compared with the strongest continents, up to the kingdom of Reinhardt. The highest mage is in the 7th class, and in the world there are only 8 mages in the 8th class. The protagonist wonders how Lucas created a monster like this. It's good to have someone like that obeying his orders. The problem is that he can't imagine a place that can hide her. He asks where she was before coming here and if she can come back to the game later. Arshia replies that she stayed in a sacred city in the maintenance warehouse, then it was sent here by the server. If you want to go back to the maintenance storage, you will have to go alone. Adrian asks if she has stealth or magical concealment. The girl replies that she can hide mana. He asks her to test it. Arshia closes her eyes and her shield disappears along with the armor of her body. The protagonist is happy because then the girl will not be discovered as a mage by the knights. Now, Arshia looks like an ordinary girl and Adrian says he will make good use of her bad reputation. In the next day, the rumors start to spread. People comment that the Viscount's second son is taking a woman home. The protagonist made a point of taking Arshia shopping. They were seen together everywhere possible. Arshia was called any woman for being involved with the protagonist. Sylvia thought differently and was happy that her son found a bride. Later that day, the protagonist entered the game with his support. He was confused about what would happen to the girl's body when they left reality. Arshia told him that her body would be in reality as if it was resting. But she left a protection monitoring function activated. This means that she will protect him if something in real life happens. At that moment, the conversation of the two is interrupted by a loud roaring noise. The orc warrior has arrived to destroy them. This is the boss of Stage 2 of the Destiny mission. The system warns that the use of items that facilitate hunting is prohibited, such as bombs and scrolls. Adrian says that the Sorcerer Lord really wants to create a strong disciple. He turns to Arshia. At that moment, the orc shouts that they are damn humans and lowers his staff with force. The staff hits the steel shield and he is pushed back. The monster looks without understanding how Arshia managed to stop his attack. In the next moment, the protagonist finds the opening to shoot his magic missile. The orc is hit in the eye. The system notifies a critical hit. Adrian is happy because the power of his magic missiles has surpassed those of a primary circle. While the boy celebrates the advance, the monster gets up and performs another attack. The protagonist, who was distracted, is saved by Arshia's shield. Despite the critical hit, the orc continues with many life points. One blow is enough for Adrian to be eliminated, so he mentally thanks him for having a support equal to Arshia. There are many life points to take from that ogre, and the protagonist starts using the ability to dig. A hole appears in the ground and the enemy falls. Adrian asks Arsha for help to prevent the opponent from getting up while he continues the attack. After a few attacks, the orc appears to have been run over, but still has 50 health. Adrian fires another magic missile. The system notifies that the opponent has been defeated, and the third floor of the magic tower has been opened. Meanwhile, in Viscount Lawrence's office, Anna asks what her husband is thinking. Rayford is silent. Then the woman asks if he is sad because Adrian took a commoner to the mansion. The Viscount pushes her away and delivers a letter. The official wife realizes that it is a special forces order, where she calls people to fight. Anna asks if her husband is really thinking of sending Cedric to battle. She tries to convince him to send Adrian, justifying that he spends every day at the mansion just focusing on games. Rayford asks if she now thinks he is necessary. Anna replies that Adrian spent all this time taking advantage of the rights of the nobility. The Viscount does not seem to agree initially, but follows the current wife's decision and decides to send Adrian in this battle, but makes it clear that when the boy returns, he will become completely independent, so Anna should not interfere in his life ever again. The next day, the protagonist finishes training with Vice. The knight says that his physical strength has improved a lot thanks to his consistent training in the last few days. Adrian thanks him for the compliment, even though he knows that his improvement is because of the skills of the game Chronicle. When he completed the second stage, he received a very satisfactory, in addition to receiving a lot of money and forming the second circle. He also gained a subspace, so the protagonist has his own inventory to hide the necessary items. He tells himself that he is very lucky to be able to improve his stats in the game and bring it to reality. Depending on his effort, he can even become a mage, while having physical abilities comparable to those of a knight. At best, if the royal fully absorbs the stats received from fate, there is a chance to become a scarier monster than the Archmage Lucas. At that moment, Adrian's thoughts are interrupted by a call. He is informed that His Highness has summoned him in the castle. A few days later, a meeting takes place at Lawrence's castle. Cedric is against the protagonist, being the family's representative on the battlefield. Viscount Rayford replies that Cedric is the only heir of this family and cannot be in danger. Sylvia questions if Adrian is not precious. The Viscount replies that there is a difference between the protagonist and Cedric when it comes to the heir of the family. Adrian begins to get annoyed with his father's words, but deep down he understands that this is the best solution for his life. He is sure that he will not have problems on the battlefield because he is from a noble family. In addition, he can get rid of Anna for good. So Adrian says loudly that he will participate in the battle representing the family. Cedric says he won't want to contradict his father's order, but promises to finish off the protagonist if he defames his family's name. Adrian finds this very funny because until the moment Cedric didn't understand that he's going to fight in his place so the guy doesn't get hurt. Anyway, the protagonist has no desire to continue here and says goodbye, but the father asks to have a private conversation. Then they walk in the free area of the castle. The Viscount is direct and says that if everything goes well during the battle, Sylvia and Adrian will be transferred to the king's land. This is the reward he prepared for the protagonist to fight in Cedric's place. Both were also away from Anna's eyes and her interferences. The protagonist thinks the reward is too good and wonders if his stepmother really agreed to it. He doesn't trust his father's words. The Viscount notices his hesitation and says he understands that son doesn't trust him. Adrian replies that he basically has to come back alive to receive something like this. The father agrees and hands some artifacts into his hand. Are two rings. The first is a class 5 shield and the second is a large class 7 shield. He decided to give this to the protagonist because on the battlefield it is not allowed to use teleportation. Adrian realizes with surprise that they are really good items. The Viscount advises to use them when in danger. Suddenly, a sinister aura catches the protagonist's attention, and he notices Anna and Cedric. Certainly they wouldn't let him talk alone with his father. The Viscount knows the protagonist's concern, and says that he doesn't need to worry about Sylvia. Obviously, these words don't serve as any support for Adrian. After all, he was poisoned at the age of 7, and the attitude his father had was disappointing, but at this point he has no one to trust but his father, so Adrian tells the Viscount that he is trusting his words. Later that day, the Viscount doesn't feel very well. He can't forget the conversation he had with his son earlier. For some reason, the man has the feeling that the protagonist has hidden his true personality all along, since the incident with the poison. Meanwhile, at Adrian's mansion, Sylvia begins to cry, very worried about her son. He tries to make sure that everything will be okay and will come back from the battle alive, but his mother is very afraid that the worst will happen. The protagonist replies that it is good that something happens because then these damned wands accumulate more crimes, and it is easier to get rid of them. Sylvia asks him to speak quietly so no one hears. The protagonist replies that Urshi is taking care of the door. He says that everything will be fine and it's just a matter of time to get rid of that person's annoying diaries. 2 days pass and the day of Lawrence's army deployment arrives. The employee Harmon is already in trouble. He asks if the young man knows he is going to battle. The man says that he cannot take his girlfriend to the battlefield. Even so, Adrian takes Sarsha to the levitation train. Inside there is a meeting, and the protagonist makes it clear that he is not going to the battlefield without the girl. It turns out that Arsha agreed to give her life for him if necessary. In addition, Adrian spent 200 million in the game for any unforeseen event that could occur on the battlefield. Thanks to this, he rose to the 3rd level of the encounter with luck and received some rewards. A bottle of omnipotent healing and 3 bottles of elixirs. Everything is stored in your inventory in case it needs to be used. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that he doesn't have much to talk about at the meeting and says he's leaving. Harmon looks scared. Adrian warns that he's going to the room to play his game. A man with red hair says that before he didn't believe the rumors were true. The protagonist recognizes that guy as Dalton. He belongs to the Vanguard. One of the highest positions in a battle, they basically decide the military strength of a nation. Dalton calls the protagonist's attention, saying that he can be recognized as incompetent. After all, he brought a girl to a battle and is still saying that he will play. He even understands to bring this girl because she is very beautiful. At that moment, another person interferes in the conversation and tells him to be careful with his words. Dalton is silent immediately. That man is the deputy leader of the Vanguard, called as Billiam. The protagonist watches the deputy leader apologize for his subordinate, but deep down he feels that everyone in that place agrees with Dalton's words. Then he just turns his back and says they can text him if you need him. A little later, Arsha and Adrian face a much bigger monster this time. The protagonist uses an item called Salamander Tears. It is an item made with expensive materials and deals 3,000 damage. Adrian uses Salamander Tears to defeat that enemy, and the system notifies him of his victory. He has also reached level 80 and will be sent to the secret room by the god Ariel. Arsha and Adrian are teleported to the 4th level quest. The demon appears with 32,000 hit points. The protagonist says that they need to defeat this boss before reaching the western headquarters. The Lich demon in front of him is scary. Despite this, the protagonist hopes that this boss will be slow. Suddenly, the Lich shouts ice spears and Adrian is surprised. At that point, Arsha is far away to protect him. The protagonist understands this and realizes that the only solution is to dodge. He tries and starts screaming in pain. The Lich demon bursts into laughter, saying that he heard the sound of bones breaking. Adrian couldn't dodge and was hit in the shoulder. The pain is intense and he gets annoyed by the demon's laugh because it looks familiar. An image of Cedric flashes in his mind and the protagonist stands up in anger. The demon attacks with fire magic. Arsha takes the lead and holds the impact with the shield, while Adrian runs after her holding a sacred artifact. He asks the girl not to let the Lich attack again and she agrees. The protagonist used that artifact with sacred attributes to burn the demon. Lich screams in pain without understanding how he was hurt with a simple wand. He tries to create a wall of fire to get rid of the attack, but Adrian pierces the protective barrier and shouts that he will finish off the damn monster that looks like Cedric. Lich is hit in the face with the sacred artifact. The system notifies the host's victory and the protagonist falls to the ground breathless. Arsha runs to him and uses a healing potion from the inventory. Adrian thanks internally for the support's help, but was surprised when he realized that she could open his inventory. The system quickly sends them to the 5th floor of the tower. Adrian, already recovered, runs to the treasure. The reward this time is 500 billion coins and round glasses. The protagonist is surprised by the second item and says that it must not be in ordinary glasses. He puts it on his face and the system explains that the item has clairvoyance and improved vision. He analyzes statistics and people's true emotions during a conversation. The item is better than Adrian expected. After completion, his 4th circle was created. The next day, the floating train arrived at the headquarters west. Adrian is recognized by some members of the special force. They thought that Cedric would be the representative of the Lawrence family. Someone says that Adrian was a genius in childhood until he took poison. The protagonist interrupts the conversation and confirms that he was the one who took poison. The men try to disguise it and welcome. Soon after, the first introduces himself as Viscount Evans, the head of the local team of this headquarters. The second man introduces himself as Viscount Miller, assistant to Chief Evans. The protagonist says that it is a pleasure to meet them. Evans checks the number of people who will be in the battle. Adrian says that it is 5 vanguards, 50 knights and 1,000 soldiers. Evans replies that this battle will end only with the vanguards. The protagonist forces a smile, realizing the man's arrogance, but in the end agrees with Evans. After all, only great sorcerers of the 7th circle or above can control the vanguard. As far as he remembers, it was Archduke Lucas who created the vanguard system. Miller warns that Lawrence's army was organized as the 2nd Independent Brigade, under the command of the 3rd Division. Then he must make sure to obey the commander of the division named Otis. The protagonist agrees. Commander Otis is the great lord of the West. He expects the man to be more tranquil than these hostile viscounts. A week later, we see that the protagonist did well and shouted that Otis was the best. It turns out that the commander simply took a vacation from the soldiers. Adrian was informed that Otis was absent and only returns at the beginning of the battle. The protagonist found the man very irresponsible, but in a way he would have more time to improve his skills in the chronicle. At that moment Arshia says that someone entered his room and he immediately closes the game. Arshia blocked Dalton's way holding his arm. The man was surprised by her strength. Adrian puts on his glasses and checks the invader's emotions. He is startled when he notices the angry guy and asks what the man came here to do. Dalton replies that he was only worried about his health because he spent a lot of time in the room, but this girl is getting in his way. Adrian hits Dalton's knee and he staggers forward. The protagonist says that he made it clear that he was to text him if something happened. Arshia is there to protect him, so you better make up a good excuse for entering the room without permission. Adrian accuses him of trying to murder him. Dalton is offended and says he is a vanguard. He would never do something like that. The argument draws the attention of other knights. The protagonist asks Arshia to explain what happened here. She says that Dalton entered the room and wanted to take him. The man says it's a lie, and she is trying to blame him for something that didn't happen. He tries to convince the protagonist to believe him and says that this woman is lying. Adrian notices the knights that Dalton brought with him and reaches out to get the dagger that is with Arshia. Then he furiously tells Dalton that by the knights it is possible to see that he organized a mutiny, so he makes a point of giving the punishment to the vanguard. The protagonist made that decision because he was not willing to be humiliated. Now that he was away from Anna's eyes, it was easier to act. At that moment Adrian holds the dagger and tells the man to take a step forward. The news about the disagreement between Adrian and Dalton reaches the deputy leader Billiam. He is informed that the commander of the brigade has given the order to assassinate Dalton. Billiam is against it because they are about to enter the battlefield. Losing a knight will be missed. At that moment, the deputy leader invades the protagonist's room and comes across a dagger flying towards him. Adrian says that the man arrived just in time to save his subordinate. The deputy leader looks at Dalton on the ground and asks what happened here. The protagonist says he didn't think chasing a woman was part of the knight's organization. Billiam turns to the knights and yells, asking what they did. Men admit they embarrassed the girl and apologize, while Dalton continues on the ground spitting red liquid. Billiam gives the order to confiscate the weapons that the vanguard has. In addition, the 3 knights who were accomplices will be sent to prison as well. Billiam bends over to apologize, but Adrian just warns him to clean up the mess that was left in his room while he waits outside. The deputy leader tells himself that the boy finally dropped the mask. He was eager to meet the real Adrian. A while later, Arshia and Adrian return to Chronicle. They fought the boss from the 5th floor. Arshia is on the defense while the protagonist thinks about what attack he will use. The fallen knight is currently at 12,800 health points. He forces an attack with the cursed sword. Adrian holds the blessed artifact and hides behind Arshia. The fallen knight followed him with his eyes and was distracted. Arshia took advantage of the moment to hit him in the face with a shield. At that moment, Adrian used his blessed artifact, ending the boss's life. The system notifies the host's victory, and he is teleported to the treasure room. The protagonist was shocked by how much money fell into his account. Suddenly, his attention is directed to the rewards that have arrived. Several interfaces appear. The protagonist takes 2 pieces of equipment and leaves the rest to Arshia. Fortunately, all the items are good. Arshia says that he has an intruder. Adrian leaves the game and hears someone apologizing for entering his room. The knight calls the protagonist's commander and explains that he felt a powerful aura suddenly, then came to check if everything was okay. Adrian replies that he doesn't have to worry because it was his artifacts. The knight then leaves the room. The protagonist takes the sword he won when completing the 5th floor and understands why he caught the knight's attention. It is a sword that a vanguard would certainly use. The system warns that the Sword of Istra was made by Archduke Lucas himself and has a machine that can store aura inside. This allows anyone to use force. The guarded aura lasts for 15 seconds when it is released. Adrian reminds that Vanguard's force equipment is to amplify the knight's aura. The aura is different from mana because it cannot be created artificially. He assumes that a mage's equipment has the same function. The system sends the 2 aura equipment he chose to use. Adrian is surprised by the beauty of the items. This explains why everyone wants the fate of Archduke Lucas. 2 weeks pass. Adrian was appointed representative of the Lawrence family and led the army on the front line against the Crows and Empire. The tense atmosphere when he arrived seemed to be gone. Even so, the servants are worried about the possible attack of the enemy clan. It can happen at any moment. All they do is wait for the other side to do something. In the midst of all this, the protagonist was surprised by the way the deputy leader treated him. Billiam seemed friendly and cautious. Adrian was more relaxed about it. He also checked Arshia's status and saw that she was happy. The protagonist was in doubt if she could be like this because they came for a walk. He even compares her to Happy Dog. It's strange because he didn't know that a homunculus had emotion. For some reason, the girl is starting to show personality. Adrian doesn't know anything about her, but is happy to feel her emotions. At that moment, Arshia's status changes to very happy, but she doesn't show any emotion. The protagonist laughs and says that they are going for a walk other times. Suddenly, a soldier blocks their way. Adrian asks if he has any problems. The guy invites him to drink something. The protagonist soon checks his emotions and realizes that the soldier is not a bad person, he is just embarrassed. The other soldiers laugh at Lopez's attitude. Adrian understands that the poor guy was sent by his friends to do that, so he decides to leave. But before he asks why Lopez chose to be a knight, the guy apologizes for the invitation and says he doesn't want to go to jail. Adrian checks the soldier's stats and is impressed when he realizes that he has more than 2 high-ranking talents. He had never come across someone like that. Only homunculus like Arcia could display these stats. The protagonist comes to the conclusion that Lopez is a very rare mage. He doesn't understand why the guy is being ridiculed by his friends. Anyway, it's not his problem. So the protagonist just advises him to leave the position of knight and focus on being a mage. Lopez looks surprised while Adrian catches the attention of the other guards. A few hours later, the protagonist returned to the room and remembered the previous situation. He didn't want to get into trouble, but it doesn't get out of his head that Lopez is a unique person. If he used magic equipment in the vanguard, he would be the most incredible magical swordsman. The protagonist considers training him and putting him under his command. The problem is Commander Otis. Lopez is a different county knight. To bring him to his side, he has to convince the commander first. The protagonist thinks if he could bribe Otis, he understands that he needs to build his own influence now that he is out of Anna's field of vision, and that is why he is willing to hire Lopez. Later that day, Lopez tells himself that he imagined that Adrian was another one of those hostile nobles, but he advised him to become a mage. Lopez felt that the young master was saying that to help him. He imagined that the protagonist was different because of the rumors, but he had a good surprise. At that moment, Lopez arrives in Otis' room and asks if the commander wants to talk to him. The knight is shocked when he notices the protagonist in the room. Otis goes straight to the point and says that Lopez must meet Commander Lawrence. From today, Adrian will be his new lord. The protagonist learned some things in his past life. One day, China lost to Korea in a football game, and a Chinese fan asked why China couldn't get 11 good players with a population of 1.4 billion. A user replied that the Chinese Messi or the Chinese Ronaldo were working on a farm somewhere. The protagonist remembered that interaction between fans when he saw Lopez. It doesn't matter if you have talent or effort. Nothing will do if your potential is not exposed to the world. Sometimes people just don't realize that they are on the wrong path, like Lopez, who dedicated his life as a knight instead of magic. There are several servants who have annulled their own talent to follow another path that they thought was the only one, so they totally hid their talents. Now the protagonist was determined to recruit all the talented young people he could find. He summoned a maid responsible for washing the soldiers' uniforms. Her name is Linda Noah, and she said that the magic test was negative. The protagonist replied that the test equipment must have had problems. Noah's stats were extremely high. He was sure that the maid would become a high-ranking mage. The protagonist spent millions to summon all the talents he found at the headquarters. Anderson was an ordinary worker who was invited by Adrian. His physique was one of the best for hand-to-hand combat. The protagonist also realizes that Anderson for some reason trusts him a lot, so he decides to take him right away to the test, but first asks them to change clothes. The servants were embarrassed because they were going to buy clothes in a noble store. Adrian notices their hesitation. A new summon arrives at the store. His name is Eric Jones, and he also has good statistics. One of his skills is negotiating politics. Adrian is happy for his choices. He warns out loud that recruits can choose what they feel comfortable without worrying about prices. The soldiers obey. For now, Adrian's goal is to train them outside the base, so everyone will dress correctly to suit the environment. A few hours later, Adrian takes the 5 guests to a luxury residence where they will be staying. They are all left to open-mouthed with the luxury of the place. The protagonist gave some watches so that they could receive his messages. He said that there was nothing to worry about because the day-to-day actions will be done by other people, so it is important to focus only on studies. The salary has already been sent to each one's account. The monthly salary is 20 million. The terms of the contract are all the same regardless of the status. Everyone will receive equally. The summoned ones thank you. The protagonist makes it clear that he will increase the salary if his intuition is right. Before leaving, Adrian warns not to disappoint his expectations, as he hates to scold. The summoned say they will not disappoint the commander. Adrian has created a residence that will soon be full of people recruited by himself. The boy is happy with his choices. This is the investment he made for the future. After the recruits were left at the residence, the protagonist knew that he needed to take care of their safety. After all, recruiting seemingly normal people would draw a lot of attention. He was right because at that moment someone followed them. Arcia was quick and stopped the bandit. She was prepared for these spies because a few days ago the protagonist commented that this could happen, mainly because Cedric called him and said that Adrian should hang out with ordinary people like him. Probably the spies were sent by Cedric to report his every move. Arcia holds the bad guy by the collar while he asks the protagonist for help, but Adrian says that his brother really doesn't know when to give up, so he will start fighting back. The protagonist tells Arcia to leave the spy on the ground and uses the dagger to threaten the enemy. but the spy was too focused on the frightening aura that Arcia was exerting on him, the bandit couldn't even move. A few minutes later, Adrian holds the dagger close to the man's face and begins the interrogation. He is almost sure that the spy followed him using Cedric's teleportation. The guy decides to tell some lies to make Adrian afraid, but the protagonist calls him by the name of Bertod and says that he already knows about his whole plan. The bandit was just listening to Cedric's orders and not opposing him. Adrian tries to convince him that he understands that he was forced to spy. Bertod realizes that the protagonist will try to use him against Cedric and says that he cannot do that. Adrian approaches the dagger and says that he must enjoy living, then questions whether he will accept the job or not. Bertod's forehead is cut by the blade. The protagonist warns that all the spy will have to do is deliver false reports to Cedric. In exchange, the other spy will be arrested in his place. Bertod quickly accepts the proposal. Night comes and he reports to Cedric, who is completely beside himself when he hears that the spy Meltz has been arrested. Bertod tells that his companion tried to enter Adrian's room and was caught. Cedric broke his father's orders by sending spies to watch his younger brother. He feels he shouldn't have done that. Anyway, decides to keep Bertod informed about Adrian's situation. The spy agrees and turns off the communication clock. The protagonist is happy with the advancement. He recruited 20 more people to the residence and left Eric and Elysia in charge of the studies. For now, everything is going well. A few days after Adrian reaches level 159, he was about to celebrate when Arcia said that he needed to leave urgently. Adrian leaves the room and Viscount Miller warns that they are under attack from ships of the enemy empire. The battle is about to begin. Adrian bids farewell to the days of calm. Everyone goes to the meeting room to discuss what the next step will be. Commander Otis warns that the troops will be placed on the levitation train so that they can be dispatched at any time. From that moment on, the spatial coordinates will go to the front line on the border with the Kryzan Empire. He adds that no one should think of teleporting. If this happens, there is no way to get out alive. The protagonist thinks that if the commander does not. If it were here, it could be worse. So it's good that the Crosans attacked today. Otis ends the meeting by saying that communication will be cut. Only accredited colonels are free to do this. The others will use radio to facilitate communication. The protagonist understands that this warning is especially for him. Finally, the commander asks everyone to be on alert because the battle has begun. Adrian goes back to the room and eliminates the boss from the 6th floor. He simply ignored the warnings not to use appliances. Now his new reward has arrived. Adrian adds the Elysia account to transfer the 10 trillion coins he earned. The second reward he received was a sub-support called Black Eagle. The protagonist did not imagine that there was something like this in this world. He always thought that this type of support was usually a combat archer. Adrian goes back to reality and doesn't find the eagle. He leaves the base and looks for the animal outside. At first, the protagonist imagined that the great black eagle would appear exactly like Arcia that time, but it would be worse if that happened. At that moment, the girl screams for the protagonist and points to the sky. The knights are in shock looking at the huge eagle and ask the commander to dodge. The great black eagle lands gracefully on the ground facing its owner. The soldiers take the weapons to fix the animal, but Adrian shakes his hand saying that he doesn't need it. He checks the stats of his sub-support and realizes that she only has one skill, which is to share the vision with the master. The protagonist understands that to increase the eagle's skills, it will be necessary to complete missions, just like he did with Arcia. It won't be a big problem. In addition, the ability of the sub-support seems to be excellent and will help a lot during the battle. While the protagonist caresses the animal, the knights are in an attack position. Adrian realizes that he ended up drawing too much attention. The eagle connects with the master and displays his gentle emotions, leaving the knights incredulous. They were sure that the sub-support would go around attacking everyone. The truth is that even the protagonist expected to be attacked. A few hours later, some information of the battle arrives. The clash is expanded to the entire western border. Thanks to this, the brigade that Adrian was commander made its debut and the communication network cut the internet, so he could not enter the game. The protagonist was analyzing the information of the battle when he received the news that the army of the Kryzan Empire arrived. Adrian orders his subordinate to call the deputy leader Billiam in the vanguard. Harmon is shocked by the young master's calm and walks away. At that moment, the protagonist has a familiar feeling that they will be attacked by the enemy's vanguard, so he shouts for the 2nd Battalion to activate the energy shield. His request is granted. A bang hits the barrier and their ship swings. The protagonist didn't think the attack would be so strong because he was at a considerably distance. It is certain that the Crozan Empire will win this fight if there is no one here with the 7th circle. The knight soon warns that the energy shield has been broken. Adrian realizes that a single attack destroyed their defense. At least there is the 8th circle Arcia in that place. The protagonist is praised by the Viscounts. They recognize that Adrian saved them when he ordered the shield to be raised. Things seem to get worse outside. The protagonist analyzes how the fight is going through projections. The enemy's attack does not stand out. The real problem is the size of their fortress. The Crozan Empire has 2 fortresses in the sky. but they are significantly smaller than theirs. It was probably produced for invasion. Harmon warns that it is the first time the Croatian Empire uses these fortresses in the sky. Apparently the Empire has vanguards on the ground and fortified fortresses in the sky. It will be difficult to deal with this. At that moment a projection catches your attention. Suddenly one of the enemy's fortresses detaches and collapses. The base of the protagonist shoots at the piece. They celebrate that the fortress of the Croatian Empire is weak. Adrian looks at the statistics of the piece that fell and the system warns that it was thanks to the overload of magic power. It is not something good as the knights thought. The protagonist shouts to warn the Sky Fortress that this is an attack by the Croatian Empire. The adversary is sacrificing his own men to hit them in an attack. Meanwhile, the piece of the Croatian Empire fortress descends at full speed with fire on the way. The Sky Fortress receives Adrian's alert and goes into despair. First, they attempt an emergency evacuation and fire aerial bullets to divert the target. Some soldiers also use firearms. Everything is valid to save their own lives. But the protagonist knows that this will not help. He sees that he needs to act and uses the artifact that his father gave him. The large shield surrounds the fortress. The 7th class artifact protects them from the opponent's sneak attack. Adrian sees if the fortress in the sky is safe. They retreated in time and are also unharmed. The protagonist demands that the guards confirm the vanguard situation and take care of the wounded soldiers. Later the situation calms down and the protagonist meets with Otis. The commander praises him for today's work. Thanks to him the Sky Fortress was not hit. The Croatian Empire made the same attack against 3 other kingdoms. They were the only ones to notice and protected the fortress. Otis adds that he gave Adrian credits and told the local commander that it was all thanks to him. The protagonist thanks him. The commander then changes the subject and says that he heard some rumors about the boy. It seems that he tamed a giant beast. It's amazing because the knights who reported the situation said that he seemed to communicate with the eagle. The protagonist replies that it's not quite like that, but he decided to take care of it because it seems friendly. Otis says that he is sure that they had a mental communication. A bird expert joins the conversation and says that this black eagle is probably a species called Altair from the holy city Everhill. It is a rare species that is born with a high level of mana and is capable of flying for 5,000 km at once. Adrian pretends that he does not know this information. The expert adds that if these animals are tamed, they have never abandoned their master and are capable of sacrificing themselves for his safety. The protagonist only has Archduke Lucas to thank for the wonder of sub-support. That Lord Mage also thought of everything when he created virtual supports that are found in reality as well. It would be very difficult for the protagonist to hide something that no one had ever seen. Adrian already misses his game and asks the commander if he can use the internet again, now that the enemy has retreated. Otis replies yes. 2 weeks later, Billiam leads the vanguard under the orders of the protagonist. He asks them not to trust the radar, only the instructions of the young master. The vanguard replies that she understands. At that moment they are surrounded. Billiam did not imagine that the enemies would emerge from the ground. They were on alert thanks to the protagonist's instruction. The vanguard attacks the enemies and a confrontation begins. Billiam thought the best alternative was to wait for reinforcements, but Adrian ordered him to attack, so the leader of the vanguard shoots. A cloud of thick smoke covers them. When it dissipates, the deputy leader asks if everything is okay. At that moment, 10 soldiers of the vanguard appear under the command of Otis. The deputy leader is surprised by the speed of the reinforcements. He concludes that the protagonist already knew that this was going to happen and prepared the reinforcement in advance. Adrian asks Billiam why he is not attacking. The next target are from the back to the mountains. The deputy leader is impressed by the softness in that child's voice. The protagonist says that the goal is to defeat at least 5 units. A little later in the meeting room, the leaders talk about the 5 enemy vanguards that were eliminated. Otis says that it was all thanks to Adrian. He not only predicted the surprise attack, but also created an opportunity to counteract. Other units are suffering from it. At first, Commander Otis thought this genius was a coincidence at first, but with the way things unfolded, he is sure that Adrian is really a genius to be recognized. Maybe that poison didn't turn him into an idiot, as the rumors say. Otis has an idea and says that it would be good to bring Michelle to meet Adrian. The men are incredulous with the proposal and says that the boy already seems to have a girlfriend. He even took her to the battlefield. Otis replies that Adrian can turn Michelle into his lover. The Viscount reminds him that the young master is addicted to games, but the commander doesn't seem to find this a problem. He really wanted the protagonist to be his son-in-law. The Viscount says that everyone in that room would lose their minds if Lady Michelle found out about this conversation. Otis agrees that his daughter is a bit crazy and decides to change the subject. He says to send today's report and name Adrian as the main contributor. Meanwhile, outside the meeting room, Billiam asks to talk to Adrian privately. RC gets into position, and the protagonist says that there is no problem. He realizes from the status that the deputy leader has no bad intention. Billiam is direct and says that he knows that the protagonist is hiding his strength. Many vassals are worried about the future of the territory, especially if the young master Cedric becomes the representative. there will certainly be a crisis. Billiam gives his opinion and says that Cedric does not have the qualifications to be the Lord, so he is determined to support Adrian if he has any intention of competing with his brother. The other vassals also supported him with all their might. Adrian used the magic glasses to confirm that the deputy leader was being sincere. He assumes that Billiam is following some instruction from his father, because the two are friends. Or maybe he is acting this way because the protagonist was his savior. Either way, Adrian is not willing to take this conversation further. Then he says that he will pretend that he never heard this. The status of the deputy leader changed from happy to disappointed. The protagonist preferred to refuse this proposal now because he knows that his life will change upside down if he steals Strix's position. In addition, there is no way to judge now who is on Anna's side collecting necessary information or not. So Adrian decided to go alone with Arcia. He wants to be the only one responsible for the defeat of Anna and Cedric. This victory is totally his, but the protagonist keeps in mind the people who are really concerned about the future of the territory. The deputy leader will certainly be in his future plans. Days later, the protagonist is awarded in front of all the soldiers and leaders of the special forces. He is being the biggest contributor during the battle, and for this he received the medal of the second-class Golden Lion. The person who delivered the medal was Kalitz Reinhardt, the 23rd king of Reinhardt. Adrian was applauded by all the important people of the territory. The nobility stood watching the awards. The truth is that the protagonist didn't want to draw so much attention, but the reports gave away that he was a genius. Adrian is sure he would be threatened if Cedric was here. The scene changes to the Lawrence Palace and Cedric shouts that useless is being praised. He believes that all the merits would be his if he were participating in that battle. The boy calms down and asks where his father is. Anna replies that he is with that incompetent woman, referring to the protagonist's mother. Cedric gets even more angry and asks if she didn't realize that her father is spending more time with Sylvia. Anna yells at her son not to raise his voice with her and says that he can't poison that woman either. She thinks that the Viscount is spending too much time with Sylvia because he promised the protagonist that he would take care of his mother while he was away, so she practically puts all the blame on Adrian. Anna tells her son that he doesn't have to worry because that boy isn't even yours competitor. Soon after the battle is over, he leaves and everything will be in Cedric's hands. The boy takes a deep breath and agrees with his mother's words. After all, there is someone very powerful behind them, his maternal grandfather. In addition, most of Lawrence is under Anna's control. Cedric believes that his father, Rayford, is just a proxy who momentarily rules this land until he gives it to him. The guy can't wait to get his hands on all this. Since childhood, Cedric was annoyed by all the compliments his half-brother received. He hoped that all this would change after the protagonist was poisoned. For a while this worked, but now it seems that he was reborn as that genius he always was. This only makes things more annoying for Cedric. The scene changes to 48 days since the beginning of the battle. Adrian brings energy drink to the vanguard. The soldiers comment among themselves that they feel much more refreshed after drinking this. It is to be expected since the protagonist used the legendary elixir of medicine. Just one diluted drop is enough to make the vanguard invigorated. The soldiers return to patrol the area after drinking. The protagonist wishes him good luck. Suddenly someone warns that the commander is waiting for him. Adrian feeds the black eagle that was named Crowy. Then he gets into the car towards Commander Otis and complains that the man has been calling him frequently to the office in recent days. Harmon says that means he's very trustworthy, but the protagonist isn't so sure. A few minutes later, he enters the meeting room and meets commanders of other units. The protagonist wonders what the high-ranking commanders of the division are doing here. He remembers that he sent Otis a message to pass on any information, but apparently the commander preferred to summon several people and now he doesn't know what to expect. At that moment, Otis catches everyone's attention. He warns loud and clear that the end of the battle will be announced soon. Adrian is visibly surprised. He received the information that the enemy aliens are meeting to retreat. It seems that Crozen's soldiers had no intention of participating in a duel in the first place. The commanders believe that they did it because they wanted to increase the ego of the Empire. Otis says that in relation to the enemy vanguard, apparently they will continue to force an attack as a battle game. This annoys the protagonist because in the end it is always the subordinates on the battlefield instead of the superiors. Otis approaches and says that he does not have to worry because he will receive more rewards for the contribution he made when the battle is over. Adrian agrees. When he returns home, he will finally decide his future. Sometime later, the deputy leader also received information about a possible withdrawal from the Empire. He says that this is very good. After all, if it were an all-out battle, many people would be annihilated from all sides. Adrian asks what he is doing there when he should be resting. The protagonist takes a cookie that Arshu was eating and offers it to the deputy leader. The man accepts it and says that he is sure it is good, considering that it was given by Commander Otis. Billiam opens his heart and comments that he thinks Adrian is different from all the other young masters. He even stands guard in the center of the command while his men are resting. The protagonist mentally agrees with the man's lines, but he thinks that his attitude comes from his previous life, since there he was an ordinary person and was educated to treat everyone that way. The deputy leader says that he admires the security that the young master has. The protagonist replies that he is not that safe, but Billiam remembers watching him drink tea while the world was fighting. The soldiers managed to relax when they noticed his composure in the face of chaos. Adrian understands that these words are accompanied by a request for him to become the successor. He is about to refuse the proposal once again when suddenly the deputy leader kneels. Billiam says that he has reliable men at the same time. Around that no one can get close, the devices have also been checked so he doesn't have to worry. The protagonist takes a deep breath and says that he knows he has taken all the precautions, but this behavior can draw attention. The deputy leader replies that this is why he came here when everyone is resting. Then he speaks loudly that he wants to follow Adrian Lawrence and serve him. The knights outside also want to do the same. Adrian agrees and Billiam is surprised, but the protagonist says he has one condition: he must act normally until he receives the order to reveal. The deputy leader asks if it would not be better to gather all the forces as soon as possible. Adrian says that it is more important to follow his orders, then asks how many knights are willing to follow him. Billiam replies that there are 5 vanguards and 30 knights. The number will be at least doubled if he gathers the people of the territory. The protagonist thinks that for now he has no problem, and it will be good to work with these people. The deputy leader says that he has one more thing to say. Viscount Rayford was planning to assign Pesius to him, so it would be a good idea to recruit him in advance. Adrian is shocked. The Pesius Lord is the deputy commander of the Order of the Knights of Lawrence. With his superior skills, he had practically no rivals among all the Aura specialists, with the only exception being the commander of the Order of the Knights. The protagonist remembers that Pesius left the order after the conflicts he had with Anna, but that man is a typical and very popular warrior. In other words, it is enough to be on an equal footing with the forces of Anna and Cedric. In addition, the protagonist also thinks that he can use Pesius outside the royal family. He fully supports the idea and tells the deputy leader that he plans to meet the former deputy commander of the Order of the Knights as soon as possible. Secretly, of course. Billiam says that the young master can trust him because he will prepare this meeting in secret. Adrian is finally moving forward to build a strong alliance. He has even stopped being seen as an idiot by most of the knights of that headquarters. After the meeting with Billiam, the boy returned to focus on the Chronicle online game to form the 7th Circle. Unfortunately, this dream was short-lived because he was eliminated in seconds by the boss of the 7th Tower. Arsha and Crowe also did not resist. The system said that he could try again when he regained the character's health. A few minutes ago, the protagonist entered the game willing to destroy the boss. Since he started playing Chronicle, he never experienced the feeling of having his character murdered, but he was sure that the pain would surpass anything he had ever felt in real life. The protagonist noticed Arsha taking the lead to protect him from the attack. Crowe also attacked, but the single movement of the boss's blade eliminated them both. Adrian was the last victim. That knight had an abnormal strength, a completely different level. After the protagonist was eliminated, the system sent him to the Resurrection Village. Adrian regained his senses and still felt a lot of pain. He soon used the Resurrection Scroll as support to summon the girl. Arsha lands on the ground and Adrian asks if she felt pain. The girl says that her senses in the game are much smaller than his, so it didn't hurt so much. Adrian breathes a sigh of relief hearing this. He feels guilty for using a female body as a shield. Maybe he should change the combat style so as not to make the girl go through this again. Fighting that night showed that they need a quick change. Arsha usually blocks the enemy's movements and the eagle blocks the vision. Meanwhile, the protagonist does a lot of damage with magic. This style of combat was not enough to beat the knight. Maybe it is necessary to decrease the long attack time. This means that the eagle must attack together with them. Arsha's defense is great against that knight, so she can continue in her position. At the moment, Adrian only thinks of 3 solutions. The first is to use Circle's smaller magicians so you can do more sequences of attacks. The second solution is to use the Black Eagle as a warrior instead of support. The third is to make Arsha stop using shield and start using the sword to deal damage. The protagonist decides to use the second and third option. The girl supports him and they try again to defeat the boss, but they are eliminated again. The protagonist is reborn in the Resurrection Village and starts screaming that this is impossible. Arsha is also resurrected and apologizes. Adrian says that it is not her fault. This time he tried to use both supports actively in the fight, but the eagle was eliminated in 1 minute of fighting. He was eliminated in 3 minutes and Arsha in 4 minutes. Adrian wonders where he went wrong this time. The Black Eagle didn't do much damage to the target, but the distraction helped. Maybe her participation is essential. If used in another way, the protagonist thinks a little, and suddenly has an idea. Then he says it's time to try again. A few minutes later, everyone is eliminated again. This time they were not so bad and managed to last longer in the battle. Thanks to this, he was able to see the knight's fighting pattern. Adrian tells himself that just try again now that he knows the fighting pattern. The 5th attempt begins. The knight laughs at his opponents and encourages them to change classes. Adrian smiles and asks if he has ever heard about bombs. The next moment, the protagonist attacks with magic bombs. Arsha and Crowe help, But a few seconds after the girl is eliminated, Crowy also falls. The protagonist is the last. The group doesn't give up and tries for the 9th time. The boy has tried all the formations he knew. Even though casting magic while dodging attacks was a problem, he still managed to hold out for 25 minutes. Thinking about it, the protagonist decided to use the items focused on reflexes. Some eliminations happened during the journey, but Adrian kept reviving and attacking. He tried to be more evasive and cast several spells. In the end, he was eliminated. This time the protagonist gives a happy smile even though he failed. The knight memorized his damage and set it aside, allowing the other members to attack. This resulted in 62 minutes of fighting, and the boss received 84% damage. Adrian understands that he cannot give up. After the last failure, the system expelled him from the game. It turns out that the boy exceeded the allowed time. The protagonist takes a deep breath and does some stretches with his arms. He says that he feels that the world is moving more slowly. Girl replies that this feeling is because he has been eliminated several times. Over time, he will get used to it. Adrian asked if she was feeling anything different. Arcia looks at her hands and replies that she feels her body is stronger. The protagonist looks delighted at the girl. He is amazed that her answers are nothing like artificial creations. Soon the girl will be acting 100% like a human. The protagonist soon warns them that they better rest and get back to the game when they wake up. A few hours later, the system notifies that there were 17 failures. Adrian tries to eliminate the boss for the 18th time. This time the knight is fatally hit. The system notifies the victory. The protagonist celebrates with jumps and screams of happiness. He completed level 7 of the Lucky Encounter mission. After that, Adrian was teleported to the 8th floor of Archduke Lucas Tower. He is impressed by the size of the room. It is the size of a real library, and most of these decorations are not made with game graphics. Adrian was distracted by the new floor when he thought everything was too good. So he certainly thought there could be more enemies. Arcia smiles and says that the master does not need to worry. The protagonist didn't even know that she could smile like that. Suddenly a hologram begins to materialize in front of them. Adrian realizes from the silhouette that he is a goblin and assumes that it is a new support. The hologram materializes and the protagonist screams, asking if he is the Archduke. The little one introduces himself as Chester. He is the manager of Destiny and also a fragment of Lucas. Adrian is open-mouthed. Chester says that he is an NPC created by replicating Lord Lucas' memories. Adrian understands that Chester works like a clone, so it is likely that he does not help him. Chester says that he does not need to be apprehensive. The protagonist replies that the little one does not look like an NPC. In fact, he seems to choose his own actions. Chester replies that this is obvious. After all, he was created with someone's living memories. Adrian says he understood. Even if Archduke Lucas has passed away, he will continue to live in this space thanks to his creations. Chester says that the boy can understand it that way, but none of it is eternal. Chester says that his job is not to live forever as an NPC, but to live in the mind of the next generations. Archduke Lucas thought that even if a cloned memory had a consciousness, it was not his true self. So he created a virtual space like this. Lucas would create a homunculus like Arcia and record his memories there if he really wanted to be eternal. The protagonist had not thought about it. In fact, he imagined that at the end of the tower, Lucas was going to steal his body to try to revive. But he is relieved to know that it is all in his head. Adrian is sincere and tells the little one that the top floor was very difficult. He thought he would not make it. Chester shakes his staff and the system warns that Adrian can use the authority of administrator of the Hollywood system 5 times. Chester says that this ability would already be given to the boy at some point. The protagonist asks what he can do with it. He is told that he will be able to exercise administrator authority over all programs based on the Hollywood system, which is a virtual reality system. Adrian is surprised. The Hollywood system with virtual reality features is similar to Internet Earth. In other words, it means that the protagonist can control all the information posted online. Chester soon warns that he must abide by the rules about the administrator's authority. First of all, the authority cannot be used in Chronicle, because it is the world of Archduke Lucas. Adrian is also forbidden to directly access the brains of other users. In addition, he cannot harm anyone in that place, even if it is indirectly. The protagonist says that these rules make sense. After all, Lucas was not sure if the administrator's authority would fall into the hands of a good person. The first thing Adrian tries to do with his authority is to launder the money acquired through fate. Chester recommends creating false investment records. The protagonist questions if it is not dangerous for someone to search the documents. The little one replies that the probability is low if he manipulates the market as a whole. From the past, present, and future reports, the protagonist is happy and says that he will use the first permission for this. He also asks Chester to make a record Arcia, as if she had come from Everhill and was orphaned after losing her parents. The protagonist is treating Chester as if he were the genie in the lamp. He questions why did Lucas create this for someone he didn't even know. Chester replies that Lucas did it because he didn't want the life of the one who met destiny to be as difficult as his. The protagonist has a sense of comfort with these words. Maybe if he didn't know the story of an inhabitant of the earth with so many legacies, probably his life would be pathetic. Adrian feels that he has gained a purpose since he heard about Lucas, so he kneels down and thanks his master. Chester turns his back and says that he is not Archduke Lucas, but he gives a corner smile that gives away that he is happy to find someone like Adrian. The system finally delivers the rewards of completing the previous floor, in addition to money. The protagonist also formed the seventh circle. The scene changes to the city mission. Pecious receives news of the protagonist's contributions. Billiam says he believes that Adrian's leadership in controlling the territory will develop even more than it is now. He questions whether Pecious did not intend to support Adrian anyway. Pecious says that he does not support a child. Immature, he only came to talk to the deputy leader because he thought it was an important matter. It is a fact that the boy excelled in the battle, but he doesn't think he deserves his trust. Billiam laughs and says that the two are really similar. Probably Pecious believed the rumors about the young master. It turns out that he is not that person of the rumors. The deputy leader says that he was able to witness Adrian's genius with his own eyes. After all, he was the one who was on the front line listening to the protagonist's command. He even dares to say that Adrian is the greatest genius of this era. Maybe Pecious doesn't understand this now, but the boy managed to win over even supporters who were on Cedric's side. Pecious says that the deputy leader seems to be devoted to this boy. He says that if what Billiam said is true, then that rumor about Adrian having become useless after poison is a lie. He just wore a mask to protect himself. It's a very smart attitude. He asks what Billiam intends to do. The deputy leader replies that he wants to persuade the vassals who maintain neutrality and the balance of power towards the second young master. Pecious says that it is a somewhat complicated task, but he is looking forward to it. Billiam shouts that he made a great choice. Pecious replies that he has not yet decided to support the boy. Before anything, he wants to meet this genius. The deputy leader says that he will call Adrian now. At first, Pecious did not believe that the protagonist was someone so incredible, but after this conversation he feels that finally after 10 years he has the chance to rematch against Anna. Billiam tries to talk to Adrian and even hits the communication clock. He is embarrassed that the protagonist does not answer. Pecious looks carefully when suddenly a light bursts into the air. It was a very soft mana. The men realize that something like this only belongs to someone from the seventh circle. They wonder who could have something like that. Suddenly the protagonist teleports with Arsha to the men's room. He soon warns that they are surrounded. But no one understands what he is talking about. Adrian assumes that the bandits used artifacts to hide their presence. At that moment Adrian screams to attack. Arsha eliminates 5 assassins in a matter of seconds. The protagonist scolds Pecious and Billiam. Both seem powerful, but were surrounded by bandits. The deputy leader did not understand how this happened. Adrian says that he spent 13 years preparing for this moment, so he wouldn't let anyone interrupt his plans. Pecious realizes that he judged the second young master wrong. Now he needs to worry about being useful to this child. The person standing in front of him is totally different from what he imagined. On the other hand, the protagonist took the opportunity to check Pesso's skills. The commander has a lot of talent, and his emotion is positive. He asks if it was Anna who sent these people. The protagonist confirms and then cleans the bodies using repair magic. Billiam and Pecious are impressed that the bandits have disappeared. The protagonist says that it is better to talk elsewhere. A 5th-class magic surrounds the men and they are teleported. A few years ago, an incredible magic teacher appeared. A nation with 4 empires were devoted to this person. His name was Kine Riverdale, a great successful teacher, teaching several wizards to reach the 7th circle. The greatest wizard in history was Archduke Lucas without a doubt, but the greatest teacher was Kine Riverdale. The protagonist lied to men saying that he learned everything about magic from this teacher. Pecious found it suspicious because Kine Riverdale has already passed away. Adrian says he learned everything a few years before this happened. Pecious still didn't understand how it was possible, because he always heard the servants say that the boy spent the day focused on games. At that moment, Adrian says that the commander is right. It turns out that Professor Kine's teachings took place in the virtual world and in the real world. It even displays the system's interface. Certainly everything the protagonist told. Convincing men was a lie. He couldn't just say that his statistics in real life increase, because he enters the world created by Archduke Lucas. No one would believe his words. So he basically said that he attended Professor Kine's classes virtually. The protagonist even created a fake hologram with an image of him and Professor Kine together. Men believed the lie. That montage was created by Chester, in addition to receipts and fake books that the protagonist claimed he got from the professor. The writing seemed true. The protagonist believes that even Kine's followers and students would believe him if he saw this. Adrian knows that he would be more exalted if he said that he found the fate of Archduke Lucas. But he is sure that his life would turn into hell. Being an apprentice of Professor Kine Riverdale seems more comfortable. The protagonist then warns Perseus that he doesn't have to worry about Cedric and Anna because Arsha will take care of it. Perseus is surprised because he thought his task would be extremely this. Adrian says he has another plan for him and asks the man to extend his hand. Perseus obeys, and the protagonist brings the clock closer. At the same moment, a transfer of 20 billion is made to Perseus. Adrian explains that the commander must create a group under his command to gather information. The truth is that he plans to ask this group to do dirty work to achieve his plans. But he doesn't know how to ask something like this to a knight like Perseus. The commander reveals that it is a lot of money, but the protagonist replies that it is enough. In addition, his savings are much greater than that. After the conversation, the protagonist gets up and says that he wants to take Cedric from his place as heir, then asks if Perseus intends to help him. The commander bows and promises his loyalty to the young master. Meanwhile, at Lawrence's palace, Anna receives the news that her 5 assassins have disappeared without a trace. She asks if the captain of security had not said that those men could beat anyone, unless it was a master of the aura or a great wizard. The captain is about to agree when a glass of wine flies on his head. Anna yells angrily, asking what went wrong. She regains her calm and asks if they were able to locate Perseus and Billiam. The man replies that Billiam has returned to his unit. Perseus' location remains unknown. Anna says that this means that Perseus is alive. The deputy leader would call Rayford if something had happened. Anna is angry because the meeting between Billiam and Perseus can only mean that they are plotting something against her. In addition, her husband gave the order to stop watching Sylvia and Adrian. The woman feels that she is losing control. Adrian was praised and managed to win over Billiam. This is not good for her and for Cedric. Anna is sure that if the two commanders join the side of that illegitimate, they will become unstoppable. She says that she needs to make sure that Cedric has no competitors, then suggests murdering Adrian. The captain looks incredulous and she asks if he is afraid. Anna believes that this is the only right way. The guard tries to say that this will drive Viscount Lawrence away. In addition, the young master is very famous. Anna interrupts him. She goes to the bottle of wine and says that the guard has worked with her long enough to know that he should not answer. Anna pours the wine on the man's head and says that there is no other way, so he must not disobey. The guard tells himself that he screwed up. He just didn't want Adrian to have an end so soon, but he has no choice but to follow Anna's orders, so he apologizes to her. Suddenly, Anna says she will blame him for Adrian's murder. The man is incredulous, but the woman says that this is the way he has to show his loyalty to her. The guard replies that he will prove his loyalty. Anna begins to leave the room. She demands that this time he ensure that the killers who fail are eliminated. The man stands alone in the office and tells himself that he has thrown his life away by trying to thwart this woman. The only chance to stay alive is for Cedric to inherit the Lawrence family. The scene changes for Adrian and the commanders. They celebrate the victory of the 23rd Division. Now the end of the battle has been officially announced and everyone can finally rest. Otto says that he has gained more recognition thanks to the brigade of the young Lawrence. The protagonist thanks for the compliments. Other young masters say that thanks to the battle they secured possession of the throne. Everyone was given credit in this battle. The protagonist thinks that it wouldn't have happened if he had kept all the rewards, but thanks everyone for their support and is called humble. Otis tells Adrian that his actions have been recognized and he is sure that he can become the Lord. Adrian doesn't think so. There is a big difference between inheriting a title and earning a title alone. It doesn't matter how high a rank you get in this battle, because you don't have a county yet and you can't pass on your title. But it's okay because Adrian didn't fight hoping to win that. Otis says it's a shame that the young master with so much potential doesn't have an environment to express himself. Adrian is sure that this will change when he becomes the legitimate heir of the Lawrence family and removes Cedric. Otis proposes that the boy join his family, so he will get a territory to command. Adrian is embarrassed by the idea while Otis says he has a daughter. The protagonist tries to change the subject and says he will think about it. Otis replies that he will welcome him with open arms. But the protagonist heard that the commander's daughter was a lunatic, so he definitely doesn't want to marry her. But it's good to know that he has that support. It's not long before Cedric and Anna are removed from the family. The day after the end of the battle between the Reinhardt Kingdom and the Kryzen Kingdom, the main army returned to the base. Adrian says goodbye to the soldiers and commanders. He is invited to return whenever he wants and thanks him. Later that day, he enters the game and rests after eliminating one more beast. Adrian enters the game whenever he has free time. His goal is to get strong quickly. Currently, his level is at 202. But the level requirement to challenge the Lucky Encounter mission is 250. The protagonist feels that he is not advancing. The monsters also get stronger as your team gets stronger, so it's impossible to level up more than one level a day like before. It's self-explanatory because the new bosses need at least 5 team members to eliminate them. Adrian thinks he'll have to recruit more members to the group, but soon changes his mind because it might look suspicious if it shows up with someone else. At that moment, Adrian calls Arsha, but she doesn't answer. Crow starts making noise to get her attention. The protagonist realizes that there is something strange and quickly leaves the game as soon as he returns to real life. He realizes that his room has turned into a battlefield with Arsha trying to hold the invader. Adrian immediately uses the 5th class shield to protect them. The assassins flee. Arsha reports that these invaders were the same as those who surrounded the commanders, but this time they used aura swords and other aura weapons. The protagonist understands that they are vanguards attacking. Arsha says that Billiam was late, but is dealing at this moment with the assassins. At first, Adrian thought it was okay because Billiam is also a vanguard. However, Arsha says that it won't be easy like that. Suddenly, the protagonist notices some armored golems. He laughs as he says that Anna has surpassed herself this time, then hands an aura sword to Arsha and asks if it's enough. She answers yes, and the protagonist also prepares the staff. Spider monsters begin to approach. But the next moment, Adrian strikes and an explosion erupted from his artifact. The monsters are sent out of the floating train. The protagonist eliminates the weakest and tells Arca that they need to catch the others. On the other hand, the captain of the enemy vanguard realizes that there is no way to continue. They lost a lot of time and did not complete the plan. Suddenly, an explosion engulfs the enemy vanguard. The captain realizes who is responsible and screams, asking how the Lawrence family has such a demon. While Adrian attacks the monsters, Arsha cuts the enemy's teleportation power. The captain orders to finish off the girl. Otherwise, they won't be able to escape. The captain didn't think there was an aura master and an archmage in that place. The man simply decides to flee and abandon the rest of the vanguard, but Adrian freezes the man in place. Arsha cuts off the enemy's arm and the protagonist yells for her to wait. The blade stops the captain's face centimeters. The man looks back, realizing that his army has been annihilated. Adrian warns him that he has nowhere to escape. Suddenly, the captain spits out a purple liquid and falls to the ground unconscious. Arsha checks the vital signs and says that the man has passed away. It looks like he chewed poison. Adrian confesses that he thought this only happened in soap operas. He underestimated the loyalty of these men. Billiam's vanguard asks how the young master did it. The deputy leader replies that Adrian was a disciple of Kine Riverdale. The vanguard is surprised because he thought that the boy only knew how to stay locked in his room playing any game. Billiam replies that Adrian's teachings were conducted between reality and virtual reality. The theory is available online. The vanguard is impressed. Billiam adds that it is possible for Adrian to surpass Professor Kine. After all, he was able to fool everyone by saying that he lost his genius after Venom, but he was actually hiding his true power. The protagonist is shocked by those words. He realizes that Billiam's power of influence is really high. A few hours later, Adrian finally returns home. Sylvia runs crying to receive her son. She checks if any piece is missing and Adrian asks his mother to calm down. Viscount Rayford congratulates his son for the good performance and he thanks him. Initially, the protagonist thought he was going to have a great reception, but he prefers it to be calm like that. Probably Anna and Cedric avoided any celebration because they thought he would not survive that attack. Rayford says that he prepared a great banquet for the arrival of his son. Adrian looks happily at his artifacts. Everyone is invited to participate in the banquet. The soldiers thank Adrian for his command and say that it was all thanks to him. Rayford says that his son seems to have won people's hearts. At that moment, Cedric and Anna arrive at the banquet. The protagonist pretends that nothing happened and says that he hasn't seen them for 3 months. Anna says it's true and welcomes her. Adrian realizes that his stepmother is not so happy, but the expression of the man behind her was what caught his attention. That is the guard Morris. Even though he was in charge of the murder of the protagonist, he is relieved that Adrian survived. The protagonist realizes this when he looks at the status of Morris. He thinks that maybe it would be useful to bring the guard to his side. Someone else catches Adrian's attention. Commander Crone is at the center of Anna and Cedric's forces. Adrian is surprised to realize that Crone's trait is authority-based management instead of combat skill. At that moment, Cedric says that the boy did a great job. He thought it would be interesting to praise his brother in front of everyone. On the other hand, the protagonist just wanted to put an end to these useless two. But first he needs to act as if nothing had happened. Even so, Adrian decides that this time he won't let Anna and Cedric act with him the way they want. So the protagonist replies to his brother who doesn't care about his compliments. Everyone is surprised. It is at that moment that Adrian decides to create a justification to condemn these two damned. For this, he first leaves the atmosphere tense and draws everyone's attention. The protagonist says that his brother probably would not have survived. If he went to battle in his place, he would not be able to create tactics and would be eliminated in the first confrontation. Cedric is clearly annoyed. Adrian says that must be why his vassals are starting to abandon him. Cedric begins to curse him, but the protagonist says that this anger comes from his maternal side. At that moment, the noise of breaking glass is heard. The butler ended up tripping and knocking over the glasses in the middle of that chaotic atmosphere. Anna grits her teeth after hearing the way the protagonist is treating her son. Adrian asks if she has anything to say. Suddenly, Cedric starts laughing and pulls the short sword from its scabbard. He accuses his brother of a lack of humility after a single confrontation in battle, then suggests a duel to see who is the best. Sylvia is worried. and the Viscount says that Cedric should not start a commotion in such a happy moment that is the return of his brother. The protagonist asks his father to be silent and just observe. Cedric says that his brother has always obeyed him, but now seems to have become a rebel. He accuses Billiam of making poor Adrian's head. The deputy leader looks at the protagonist without understanding why he was mentioned in the family discussion. Anna asks if Billiam is really using poor Adrian to destroy the Lawrence family. Cedric orders the deputy leader to be captured. But nothing happens and an awkward silence spreads around the place. The soldiers say that if Cedric wants to do something like that, must do it with his own hands. Cedric realizes that he has no support and is embarrassed. He decides to act for himself and attacks the protagonist with the short sword. People are worried. But Arsha acts quickly, holding Cedric's arm with his left hand while eating a piece of meat with his right hand. The guy tries to let go, but realizes that she is very strong. He calls her an easy woman. Arsha hits him in the face with the piece of meat. Then everyone is incredulous at the girl's attitude towards the young master. Cedric falls to the ground passed out. Some whispers are heard saying that that giant guy ended up being knocked down by a turkey leg. Cedric begins to regain consciousness and hears people talking about him. At that moment, Commander Crone pulls his sword and says that the second young master has crossed the line, but the protagonist replies that it is the commander who is crossing the limits by pulling a sharp item for him. Cedric shouts that these damned dared to hurt the future lord. So everyone deserves to be murdered. Commander Crone agrees with him, but says he can't do that to the second young master. Cedric gets angry. Crone turns his attention to Arsha and says that she can be murdered. After all, she is nothing more than a commoner lover. Arsha continues with her carefree meal. The commander raises his sword, while asking if she really thought she could act like a noblewoman, just because she is a lover of one. At that moment, all the soldiers and viscounts raise their swords towards Crone. Billiam is advised to retreat, but he demands that the commander move away from Lady Arsha. Crone realizes that many of the soldiers next to the protagonist were part of Cedric's organization. It seems that they changed sides. It's strange because these soldiers put loyalty above all else. Suddenly, several knights join Cedric. The protagonist realizes that this is why Anna was calm all the time. She was waiting for the reinforcements. Cedric shouts that there is no point in repenting now. Billiam will also be arrested and punished along with everyone else. The protagonist shouts that his father is on his side and asks how the knights dare to stand against the Lord. He realizes with curiosity that the people in Cedric's organization are more armed. In addition, their equipment is overwhelmingly better. At that moment, a voice asks why Billiam is acting this way and forgot what his position is. Crone threatens to finish off the deputy leader in front of everyone. The Viscount yells at his son to use the artifact and run away as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Sylvia cries worried about her son. Anna and Cedric are happy with the situation. Crone gives the command to attack. Adrian is faced with what he has always dreamed of. He shouts for the soldiers to protect Viscount Rayford from these rebels. The other side worries about being called rebel traitors. The protagonist reaffirms that they are traitors because the Viscount is on his side, and even so they plan to attack. Adrian removes the illusion magic he put on Arcia, and the girl appears with her armor. He then warns that he will take care of the three and leave the rest to her. The girl agrees. Seconds later, a swift attack makes the enemies' heads fly. Anna and Cedric are scared in the middle of the confrontation. Adrian says that a traitor like Crone needs discipline, so he swings the handle of his sword in the man's face. Crone realizes with concern that Arsha's attack was lethal and concludes that she is a master of aura. So the man yells at the knights to attack while it should be enough. Adrian says that it is impressive that the man can give instructions to his subordinates in the midst of all this. It is expected of a commander of knights. Too bad this won't change anything. The protagonist maximizes all stats. The commander recognizes that light involving the young master. Usually wizards can use magus classes below their level without having to cast. This means that Adrian, who is in the 7th circle, can use 5th circle magic without having to cast. There is an ability that allows wizards to eliminate the vanguard. At that moment, the protagonist uses the ability to memorize, then sends the explosion of flames and Crone is hit. The commander falls to the ground. Then Adrian turns his attention to Cedric and Anna, saying that he will have fun. Suddenly, Crone jumps from the flames that hit his body and pulls the sword towards the protagonist, but he falls to the ground after the young master dodges. Crone is eliminated in the aftermath. Cedric and Anna are horrified. They do not believe that Adrian returned from battle as an archmage. A few hours later, the scene changes to the Margrave Palace. Anna's father finds out what the protagonist did and screams that he will finish him off. Raven sees all the scenes of the fight. It seems that a video was posted on the internet showing everything that happened on the arrival of the young master. Raven sees the scared faces of her grandson and daughter. He yells at subordinates that this video is spreading too fast. Maybe tomorrow most people will know about the situation. Some comments on the video are already highlighted. People think Raven supported Anna and Cedric's betrayal with the Viscount. The man replies that he doesn't care about virtual comments. He is informed that some nobles support these comments, but he doesn't care and promises to punish anyone who aligns with Adrian. Raven Magrave has military popper equal to a duke and a marquis. It would be problematic if someone with the same title of marquis took Adrian's side. Raven thinks this is highly unlikely. The subordinate says that this video can reach the king and he intervenes. Anna's father realizes that the man is right. A young archmage and an aura master will get people's attention, but Raven has an idea to turn these two into imposters. He intends to say that that video was artificially created. It won't be difficult to make people believe. The subordinate says that someone can try to authenticate the veracity, but Raven keeps his idea. He wants to finish off the protagonist and justify that he did it, because the young master started the battle. After all, accusing a marquis of combining strategy to destroy him is a crime. So he asks what forces can be mobilized now. The subordinate replies that 200 vanguards and a flying fortress. Raven says that it is enough to stop a brat who is testing his strength. He's excited to deal with it. Meanwhile, the protagonist is happy with the repercussion that his video had. He knows that the next target is Raven Magrave. The man will probably take his daughter's pain. That's why Adrian is fortifying his own alliances. At that moment, he receives a very importantly, the girl displays a big smile on her face. That is Olivia Riverdale, the daughter of the famous Professor Kine Riverdale. Olivia Riverdale is an archmage belonging to the Kingdom of Moons. Rumors say that she is close to reaching the 8th circle. The girl reached the 7th circle only at the age of 22. The protagonist is happy to get a date with her. At that moment, Olivia checks the platinum plate that Adrian said he received from Kine Riverdale. She says that it looks real and her subordinates agree. For a moment, the protagonist thinks he managed to deceive her. Who made the certificate was Chester. Suddenly, Olivia says that she is not saying that the platinum plate is real. Anyone can fake it. Adrian is surprised, and the next moment he feels pressure invade his glass. Olivia and her subordinates check if the protagonist really holds the 7th circle. Adrian catches his breath and asks why she is doing this. The girl says that it is amazing and the subordinates applaud the protagonist. Olivia replies that she was only testing her skills. She recreates a cup that was broken while saying that she just wanted to find out her exact level. Adrian asks if he has earned his recognition. Olivia replies that she still has some doubts, but does not intend to refuse the help of a genius archmage who claims to be his father's disciple and is helping his family expand their influence. Adrian thinks this way of thinking is sensible and asks what would happen if he was a villain who made his family suffer losses. Olivia replies that it is impossible for someone in their right mind to want to be an enemy of their family. The protagonist finally finds the opportunity to make a request. The next day arrives. Raven is informed that the troops will arrive in an hour. The man complains about the delay because he wanted it to be faster. Suddenly, a subordinate runs up to him and says that another video has been posted. A projection shows Olivia welcoming her father's disciple. She announces that Adrian has become a 7th-level archmage at the age of 20. The Riverdale family decided to help him reach the 8th circle. Raven gets annoyed watching the video. He feels that the protagonist is always one step ahead, as if he is reading his thoughts. After the Riverdale family shows support for Adrian, it is a matter of time for the royal family to support as well. At that moment, Olivia ends the live broadcast saying that if anyone tries to harm Adrian, the Riverdale family will understand it as an attack on them too. Raven breaks the transmission device. The subordinates thought he was going to back down, but Raven says she will go ahead as planned. The knights are worried about the intervention of the royal family, but Anna's father says that so far the king has not spoken. Then there is nothing to fear. The knight repeats that it is better to retreat because the Riverdale family is supporting the second young master. Raven yells that they will attack anyway, so they need to speed up and take that illegitimate commoner by surprise. He orders the knights to mobilize the troops immediately. At that moment, Crowy flies above the men, sharing the vision with Adrian. The protagonist realizes that Raven will not back down. He remembers about the request he made to Olivia. The girl easily agreed to hold a press conference, but she found it suspicious that Adrian did not want to be seen as a disciple of his father. Even so, Olivia introduced him as Kine's apprentice. At that moment, the protagonist puts his memories aside and tells Arshia that they need to go. He decides to just count on Arshia to reciprocate the rematch. The protagonist perfectly read the actions of his enemy, and in the end won the support of the Riverdale family. Now he feels prepared to hunt his prey. After the last fight, Cedric and Anna were arrested for rebelling against Adrian, but after 2 days they escaped from the prison with the help of the Knights of Raven. The police realize that the prisoners have escaped and start the search. While Anna and Cedric try to escape from the pavilion, the woman takes an artifact in her hand and says that they cannot live like this. The son asks if she is sure she will do it. The mother replies that she has no choice and tells him to hurry. They quickly reach the top of the castle. The ship that Anna intends to flee is already waiting for him. A teleportation light surrounds them. The group is sent inside the fortress. Anna says that she will ensure Adrian's defeat. The woman inserts the key into the flying fortress and introduces herself as Anna Lawrence. The ship identifies the user and starts moving. Anna orders the subordinate to prepare the cannon and aim at the Viscount's castle. She is about to destroy everything when suddenly the protagonist appears behind her and covers her mouth. Adrian looks at his stepmother and thanks her for unlocking the security of the flying fortress. She acted exactly as he expected. Anna is incredulous at the unexpected appearance of the young master and asks how he got here. At that moment, the subordinates are knocked down. Arsha takes care of the knights while Adrian asks if Anna is not afraid of them finding out that she planned to shoot the Viscount. It is a very big crime. Besides that Raven's troops are already arriving, then he wishes good luck to Anna and Cedric, since they will protect the Lawrence castle from the attack. Adrian knocks the woman to the ground and goes towards the control of the fortress. Anna begins to tremble as she says that there was a mistake. Maybe they will make up if they talk a little. The protagonist asks Archie to release Cedric and go to him. The girl obeys and Cedric begs for his brother's mercy. Adrian raises his arm and traps the two in a shield. Meanwhile, the knights beg for mercy. Adrian replies that he will send the soldiers back to Marquis Raven. For a moment, the men are happy, but the next second they are expelled from the air fortress. Adrian turns his attention to Arsha and asks her to edit the video. He intends to show the world the new attack Anna was planning to do. Sometime later, the video is posted and the community sees Anna saying that she is going to murder the Viscount with a firestorm. The comments accuse the woman of being a lunatic and say that Raven must be involved too. The Marquis follows the public's opinion and says that he wants to eliminate all the commoners who are commenting on this. The subordinate says that the man can even do that, but the site on which the video was posted belongs to the jurisdiction of the Elysia Union, and they do not reveal personal information of the users. Unless it is a serious crime, Raven gets angry. At that moment, the fortress with 200 vanguards arrives. He warns the captain that they must not fail, then gives the order to start the battle. The mages use teleportation magic, and the fortress disappears. Raven wonders if she should have gone with them. Meanwhile, Anna sees the new fortress coming and begs them not to approach. The protagonist fled the fortress and sat with Arcia in the free area of the castle. He realizes that the time has come and says it's time to use the mana wave. Cedric yells for his brother to forgive him and get him out of here, but Adrian drinks the wine without worry and says that he learned this attack during the battle. It is called sacrifice. Cedric and Anna scream for help. The protagonist says goodbye. At that moment, an explosion happens between the fortresses. Adrian asks Arcia if she wants to make a request for the explosion of fireworks. Arcia joins him. The protagonist finally manages to put an end to Anna and Cedric, those who made their childhood a living hell and tried to eliminate several times over the years. The explosion of the fortresses lights up the sky. Adrian says he has now won his freedom. The scene changes to a few minutes later. Raven is anxious because he hasn't received any news from the Vanguard so far. He notes that too much time has passed and the operation should have come to an end by now. The assembled knights hear the boss's murmurs. Raven believes that there was a miscommunication. He questions if the spies have already reported. The subordinate warns them that they haven't yet, but assumes that they were arrested when they helped Anna and Cedric escape. Raven asks if he's joking, but the subordinate assumes that Adrian already knew that this was going to happen and prepared himself. The Marquis says that it is impossible for him to be in the hands of that brat. Raven adds that she does not understand the delay of her men in reporting the current situation. At that moment, someone invades the room and says that an article from the Lawrence family was posted 3 minutes ago. In the video, it is possible to see vanguards of Lawrence territory clashing with the fortress. After the collision and explosion happened, the subordinate adds that the Lawrence family posted an evacuation notice an hour ago, and all the residents of the county evacuated. In the article, it says that while communication was completely cut off, a large explosion suddenly happened in the sky. Raven says that the protagonist must have sacrificed his own team to create the false feeling that it was an accident. Suddenly, the Marquis is consumed by rage and hits his fist on the table, dividing it into 2 parts. The subordinates watch in silence. Raven asks how many troops can act now. The knight replies that 65 vanguards, or 25 vanguards in 1 fortress. If this number is exceeded, they can be convicted of breaking the law. Raven believes that there is no way Lawrence's old vanguard has surpassed itself. In addition, the mana blast that Adrian released must not have been enough to cause damage to his vanguard, but it shows that the boy is watching his steps. Anyway, now Lawrence no longer has any air fortresses for the boy to blow up. At that moment, Raven is informed that the royal family has posted a statement. They scold any family that tries to hurt Adrian. Raven starts laughing uncontrollably. The subordinates realize that the man is not well. The Marquis admits that he underestimated that illegitimate. He spent all the money he had on money for equipment and the vanguard, but in the end, he was stopped by Adrian. The man takes a deep breath and asks if the Lawrence family's communication signal has been restored. The knight confirms and he says he should immediately call Adrian. The scene changes to the Black Eagle flying over a location. Unlike Arcia that was created to reproduce the actions of a human, the Eagle was created to be a 100% support. Its attack is from close range and its only ability is shared vision. The protagonist was using Crowley's vision when he received Raven's call. The Marquis says that the protagonist should not think that he will be so lucky next time. Adrian replies that he will only rest when he is done with the Maggrave family. He then reveals that he left Cedric and Anna inside the fortress that was destroyed. Raven calls him an illegitimate and useless commoner. He also says that he will not forget this humiliation and will repay everything that happened. The protagonist realizes that the man didn't even pay much attention to the death of his daughter and grandson. Maybe it's because the two were seen as tools by the Marquis. Adrian decides to act and asks if he is on the 80th floor of the castle. In a few seconds, a gift will arrive for him. The Black Eagle begins to approach the building. Meanwhile, the protagonist asks if Raven has heard of memorization magic. It is a magical ability to take away the spellcasting time. Perhaps a 7th circle mage is enough to break the Marquis' defensive barrier. At that moment, Raven and the subordinates see the Black Eagle approaching the castle. Behind the beast, there are 10 7th level magic circles.
The protagonist asks if Raven has heard of memorization magic. It is a magical ability to take away the spellcasting time. Perhaps a 7th circle mage is enough to break the Marquis' defensive barrier. At that moment, Raven and the subordinates see the Black Eagle approaching the castle. Behind the beast has 10 7th level magic circles. Raven despairs. The protagonist says that he is looking at 10 spells of 7th circle called Fire Blast. After these words, the magic breaks through the circles and destroys the defensive barrier of the Maggrave building. The knights try to protect the Lord with a teleportation scroll. Adrian laughs at the screams he hears and wishes the men good luck. Then he turns off the communication device. At that moment, the protagonist is informed that the reporters are gathered in the conference hall. Adrian and Arcia walk towards the hall. This time the employees bow to him. In the past, it was the servants who treated the protagonist as if he were a useless illegitimate, but now that Anna and Cedric are gone, everyone trembles at the sight of him, but the protagonist is determined to leave that in the past because he wants to enjoy his new life. A few hours later, several headlines appeared on the internet. Adrian's photo was stamped on all of them. The news reports say that the young Lord Adrian Lawrence held a conference about the sacrificial incident that happened in the sky and led to the passing of Anna and Cedric. The reporters also talk about the magic circles that secretly blew up the fortress of Raven Maggrave and 200 avant-gardes. Everything turned to ashes in a second. During the interview, the protagonist said he would do anything to protect his lands. According to the news, the Maggrave's castle collapsed. But he survived despite suffering massive damage with an unexpected counterattack. The last headline places Raven's defeat as a shameful defeat. The young prodigy Adrian Lawrence attacked to defend his people. People also make comments on the internet and pour out their hatred on Raven, saying that he deserved it because he made that sacrificial attack in heaven. Other people praise Adrian's intelligence and congratulate his 7th circle at the age of 20. He posted a note on his social network thanking him for the support. The protagonist gained 1 million followers in one day. The next day arrives and Adrian talks to Billiam. The deputy leader admits that he was afraid, imagining that people could pressure Adrian for overthrowing a renowned nobleman. The protagonist replies that he doesn't care about the opinion of others. Today, he only thinks about protecting his family. Billiam understands that Adrian has suffered a lot and is finally getting the recognition he deserves. That incident with the noble Raven spread in and out of the country. There were articles that criticized the protagonist because the Maggrave family has many allies. On the other hand, public opinion is biased in favor of Adrian. This led people on the neutral side to join the protagonist. In addition, the commoners, who are basically servants of the nobles, believe that Adrian is different. Now he is ready to benefit from this support from the public and prove that he is really different from the other nobles. Thinking about it, the protagonist made some posts to let the public know what was happening. Since he was reborn in this world, he knew that discrimination against commoners by the nobility is a structural problem in Rondell. So his first goal was to change that. At that moment, someone interrupts Adrian and Billiam's conversation. Viscount Rayford tells his son that a summoning letter has arrived for him. Billiam does not hide his concern. The protagonist opens the letter and sees that Arcia has also been summoned by the Board of Inspection. The first thing that goes through his mind is that Raven is involved in this, but he also thinks that high nobles plan to take control of him, or it is a plan of the Royal Council itself to do so. The protagonist imagines that this summoning is not a good thing, because they would not send a request if they wanted to be friends. Rayford has the same thought and is worried. Adrian asks what he thinks the nobles like. The Viscount quickly replies that it is money. The young master says that he is right. The protagonist is sure that he can change the opinion of the nobles and royalty with money. Bribery will certainly change their minds. Although Adrian is confident with this idea, he realizes that the people in the room do not seem happy, perhaps because they do not believe that he will be able to do it. Billiam thinks differently and supports him. He remembers that the protagonist said he had 60 billion in money. The parents are shocked when Adrian says that it is actually 60 trillion in money. Billiam thinks this number is completely impossible. He asks if the protagonist saw the future or reincarnated to keep this amount of money. Adrian laughs at that joke because he cannot confirm that he came from another world. Viscount Rayford is sure that the nobles would go crazy if they knew about this money, but at least a fifth will be taxed, resulting in 12 trillion. The protagonist heard that the royal family grants tax exemption if a nobleman pays a high amount of tax. The Viscount says that this is true. Just the protagonist uses merchants operated by the royal family. He tries to understand if his son is interested in buying other things. Adrian replies that he wants to buy air fortresses in Vanguard. Later that day, the news reports talk about the amount of money Adrian has earned, approximately 1 trillion. The media has also reported that the protagonist has completed the tax report on the money he earned from investing. Count Otis watches the news on his TV and jumps with happiness. His wife asks if this kid is the member of the team he talked to. Otis replies yes, but it is no longer possible to call him an employee, since he will receive the title of Grand Warlock soon for reaching the 7th circle. The Count adds that he wanted his daughter Michelle to meet him. The wife agrees, saying that it would be nice to have this great wizard as a son-in-law. Suddenly, Michelle gets up from the table and says that Adrian is his type. But she is not the type of person who benefits from her partner, so she intends to conquer her power on her own. Her mother asks how she intends to do it, and Michelle replies that she will get the legacy of Archduke Lucas. The two start an argument because the girl's mother tells her to forget about this legacy. No one has ever met him in all these years, so she should give up at that moment. Count Otis draws the attention of women by saying that there is a possibility that Adrian has managed to find Archduke Lucas's legacy. This would explain his courage. The Count's wife says that she saw on TV that the Riverdale family accepted Adrian as a member. Otis says that this is perfect because the young master will be able to hide until he achieves the title of Lord Wizard. Michelle remembers that she heard on television that Adrian's money came from investments. Otis believes that it was an excuse or an agreement between the Riverdale family and the royal family. At that moment, the family's conversation is interrupted by new news. The reporter reports that she has just received the information that someone has found Archduke Lucas's legacy. Michelle is shocked to realize that someone has arrived before her. The scene changes to Chronicle. The protagonist has arrived at Archduke Lucas's tower. He was tired because this time he couldn't absorb the research books like he did with the skill books. Adrian feels like he doesn't have time to learn everything. His week is full of commitments. Tomorrow has to attend an inspection with Arcia. The day after tomorrow he must attend a party held by royalty. On the third day he will have to look for celestial fortresses and avant-garde equipment. He has not made much progress in the Chronicle because he does not have time, but he enters whenever he finds time to improve his skills. At that moment, the protagonist returns the book to the shelf. In the tower of Archduke Lucas, there is less than 1% military research. This is because the wizard has always opposed the battle. The research in which he spent the most time is called dimensional teleportation. In all the years he was alive, Archduke Lucas never married and never had a disciple. He spent his whole life researching the way back home. In this place, people think he is the one who changed the world. But the truth is that Lucas felt homesick and wanted to return at any cost. Before passing away, he left traces showing that he belonged to Earth, probably with the hope of finding someone from Earth too. But when the protagonist discovered that the Wizard Lord came from the same place as him, the Archduke was no longer alive. Now his goal is the same. He intends to study dimensional teleportation to return home. But that's not all. The protagonist wants to find a way to travel between the two worlds whenever he wants. But the research of dimensional teleportation has not been completed, so he is determined to do it on his own. At that moment, Chester praises Adrian for his respect for the Archduke's legacy. The protagonist replies that he is only an ordinary human being. He remembers that he wanted to ask the little one something. Adrian asks if there is any chance that people will find out about money laundering. Chester replies that it is possible. But for that, they would have to look for all the investors in this whole world and compare them. If that happens, they will see that there is more money than real deals. The protagonist believes that no one will do all this work. He had to use a lot of money to cover up what he did to Raven Maygrave, but still the attention is focused on him. His concern this time is someone to find out that he was the one who found the fate of Archduke Lucas. If this secret is exposed, there is a great risk of losing everything he has. That's why the protagonist thought of a plan where a fake lucky man will meet his fate. At that moment in another place, the streets are crowded with people. Everyone is there to meet the person who found the legacy of Archduke Lucas. The lucky fake is Louis Fairmont of the Prius Republic. Louis is 29 years old and works as an intelligence agent in the Prius Republic, son of President Cartro. He is nothing but a shameless one who takes advantage of his father's name. Louis is sure he has found destiny. The protagonist used it to make someone act as the possessor of Archduke Manuel Lucas's legacy and divert attention from him. Adrian wants to gain time and reach the 9th circle through this operation, so he can keep his curious eyes away, but he feels uncomfortable for having left the name of the Wizard Lord in the hands of this reckless guy. Chester says that Adrian was smart to think of this plan. There was no other way to divert attention. The Prius Republic is considered one of the 4 main empires of Rondel. At first, it seems the only country that defends democracy and elects its president. But the reality is that corruption is great. The prosecutors and the media are basically the dogs of the government. This means that the president will always be the same no matter how the vote for the election will be. The protagonist imagines that false fate will further increase President Cartro's approval rating. He didn't want anyone to be harmed by his choices, except Louis and Cartro. Chester says that it is impossible to avoid damage. Probably a diplomatic battle involving many countries will begin when the bomb called Fake Date Holder explodes. It will be difficult for Louis and the president to stay safe, Certainly, Adrian's actions will bring changes to the corrupt regime of the Fairmont family. The protagonist is hopeful that this corrupt family can be destroyed. He asks Chester to warn if there are any victims in the middle of this conflict. The little one replies that he would not accept this request in any other situation, but will obey because he believes that there is a reason why Adrian has to go so far. Chester confesses that he did not think he was concerned about people's lives. After all, he murdered Anna and Cedric along with Raven's special forces without any hesitation. The protagonist replies that he only did it because they were his enemies. Chester says that it's a great way to think. They shouldn't hesitate in the face of an enemy. Adrian feels that Chester looks more like a talking person than an artificial creature. He's eager to get to the ninth circle and create artificial creatures like Arcia and Chester. At that moment, the little one warns that he still has an administrator privilege to use. Adrian says that he will leave it to use the last one in case of emergency. For now, his level is 205, so he wants to take advantage of the time he has to hunt with Arcia and Crowy. Level 250 is his next goal. The scene changes to the protagonist's castle. The servants are talking about the change in his personality. Some believe that in the future he will receive the title of Count and Arcia of Countess. The guards heard the news that the protagonist wanted to buy 5 air fortresses. Normally, the maximum number of air fortresses for a viscount or baron is only 1. But Adrian seems to be not just a new grand noble by name, but someone who will be equipped with corresponding military capability. In other words, Adrian is the newest powerful nobleman in the Reinhardt kingdom. At that moment, the maids receive the information that Arcia needs from one of them. The women fight among themselves to decide who will perform the tasks. In the end, the red-haired maid reminds everyone that she is the leader of the kitchen. So she will do it herself. Most of the servants who worked in the protagonist's castle belong to Anna. Now that Anna has passed away, they feel that they cannot make any mistakes with the new bosses. The servants could abandon the work, but they don't want to abandon their jobs that offer a good working environment and a guaranteed future. At that moment, the red-haired maid enters Arcia's room and bows, then warns that she brought a new table of drinks. Arcia thanks her. The fight between the servants happened because everyone wanted to serve Arcia. Because she was the calmest, Arcia possessed a gentle personality like everyone around her, despite the scary title of Aura Master. In addition, the maid admires Arcia because she also came from a family of commoners. At that moment, Arcia feels that the woman wants to say something. The maid questions if the young master Adrian intends to fire the castle workers. Arcia seriously responds that Adrian is a good person and would not harm anyone. He is only cold with those who are his enemy. Suddenly, Arcia's mood changes, and she asks if the maid is the enemy of the young master. The maid feels a cold run through her body, and she stutters when she answers that she is not the master's enemy. Arcia gives an angelic smile and says that then she will have no problems. The maid hurries to leave the room, but when she opens the door, she comes across the protagonist. She apologizes and runs away. Adrian asks Arcia if something happened, but she replies that she doesn't know. After that day, there was a rumor that the protagonist felt angry at his enemies. Another rumor surfaced and said that Arcia hates people who look down on her boyfriend. The next day, Adrian takes a trip to the royal castle with his subordinates. Lopez feels insecure about accompanying him because he doesn't think it's enough. Eric also doesn't have the proper training if something happens. Eric and Lopez were part of the group of recruits chosen by the protagonist at the time of the battle against the Croizon Empire. Adrian chose them according to the talents shown in his magic glasses. Eric joins the conversation and tells Lopez not to worry. He believes that the young master did not summon them without a reason or a plan. Adrian does not call it a plan. He just decided to take his recruits because he wanted to give them a little more experience, like the 4 vanguards who act as escorts. At this moment, they are on their way to the royal castle to be investigated by the Board of Audit and Inspection of the Nobility. So he asks Eric and Lopez to record in memory the individuals who lead this country. They will see all the great nobles today. This is the only job for the recruits. Lopez replies that he will do his best. The protagonist notes that the guy is still very unsafe. At that moment, the driver warns that they have arrived at the teleportation portal. Adrian gives the signal to go ahead and the car teleports to the capital of Reinhardt's kingdom. The place is charming and draws the attention of the recruits. They have never been to this place before. Everyone gets out of the car and walks among the locals. People shout for Adrian and Arcia. A man in a green suit welcomes them both and says that they look very famous. Adrian replies that this is the fault of the media. At that moment, the guy seriously talks that he has no idea how crazy he has been lately because of the two of them. The protagonist thought it was expected that the main power class would not like it. That man in the green suit is Baron Harris Walker, a noble inspector and leader. The protagonist checks the man's talents in his magic glasses and notices that Walker has 4 exceptional talents and the trait of leadership with integrity. Despite the upper class being mad at Adrian, Walker says that he got there thanks to the work, so he deserves all the attention. The protagonist soon hands a card with his contact to the Baron. Walker asks curiously if it is a business card. Adrian says yes and adds that when he gets his own county, he will need to appoint a talented administrator to take care of him. So he invites Walker to work with him if he is interested. The Baron is silent. Then he takes the protagonist to Investigation Room 1. Walker makes it clear that only Mr. Adrian Lawrence and Mrs. Arcia Klein can enter this room. The inspection will take about 2 to 3 hours, so he suggests that his subordinates wait in the rest hall. The protagonist says goodbye to Billiam and the others. Lopez is worried about him, but Adrian says that it's just a normal inspection. The men obey orders and leave. Walker approaches Adrian and asks him to be careful because apparently the chief inspector doesn't like him. The protagonist already expected this and gives a forced smile. At that moment, Adrian and Arcia enter the room. In front of him are the nobles responsible for enforcement. The protagonist quickly understands that the reason for Walker's concern is the two men sitting in the middle. The first is the chief inspector of the nobles named Douglas Hamilton, and another man is the second prince and deputy commander of the royal guard named Luke Reinhardt. The protagonist does not understand what the second in line of royal succession is doing there. He bows, and Luke says he knew he would be recognized. Adrian replies that it is impossible not to know him. Luke says he can raise his head. At this moment, the protagonist's magic glasses show that Luke's talents are high, expected of an aura master. Adrian assumes that the prince had an aura master as a teacher and took all the elixirs and expensive medicines as treats all the time. Without this, he would probably be nothing. Luke says out loud that he will lead the investigation, and asks if the young master has any objections. Adrian says that if the chief inspector of the nobles doesn't see any problem, then it's okay. Douglas gives permission for Luke to conduct the investigation, so the protagonist has no objection.
His glasses show that Luke was uncomfortable, so he soon apologizes to His Highness for questioning the decision. Luke says that everything is fine and asks him to sit down. Finally, the investigation begins. The protagonist is sure that he will leave here without problems because he will be able to count on his alibi even if he is accused of something. At that moment, the chief inspector of the nobles is against the unilateral damage that hit Raven, but Luke argues that it was a territorial fight and Raven should have been prepared for the damage since he started the battle. He questions if Douglas intends to accuse Adrian Lawrence of attacking Marquis Raven without any need. Douglas quickly apologizes and says he was wrong. The protagonist is shocked because he thought Luke was a hostile person, but so far he has shown himself to be someone fair. The prince makes it clear that he has no charges. So he is about to close the investigation. Douglas tries to convince him to think better. He whispers in Luke's ear that Marquis Raven was on their side. The protagonists realize that these nobles were divided into Prince Luke's allies and Marquis Raven's allies. So maybe Prince Luke has developed a hostile relationship with him because of the people around him, not by his own will. At that moment, Luke asks everyone to be silent. Then he tells Adrian that he will be direct. Luke says that he is currently competing against his brother for the crown. Both seemed relatively tied, but that changed after Adrian appeared. It turns out that Raven was on his side and supported his succession, but he was knocked down by the protagonist, and consequently the support also dropped. Luke reaffirms that anyway he thinks the fall belongs solely to the Marquis. Things could have gotten worse if Adrian had stayed by his brother's side, so he wants to make a proposal before his brother. The protagonist now understands the real reason for Luke to join this investigation. The first prince is already the crown prince of Reinhardt, but a conflict arose when Luke became an aura master. The Reinhardt brothers are reasonably similar, but it wasn't expected that the second prince would get this far, because the first prince had the rightful inheritance and status. Probably Luke would be in front of the first prince if the protagonist and Arcia hadn't suddenly fallen from the sky. Adrian is sure that his calling for this investigation is that he and Arcia are the weight that can break the balance of the game, but he sees no reason to enter this political conflict. In addition, he has no title except that of Young Master. Luke says that this is the most important thing because he intends to give the title of Archmage when the protagonist joins him. His work in the last battle will be valued, and Luke also promises to support him to get the title of Marquis. The protagonist is shocked. The title of Marquis is second only to the Duke. Luke says he can help him with that. Adrian didn't want to get involved in political conflict, but these offers are tempting. He asks if his support is really worth that much. Luke laughs, saying it's worth more than he thinks. Plus, he has an aura master by his side. The second prince seems to have fallen in love with Arcia. The protagonist is gloomy when he realizes this, so he replies that he needs to think about the offers. Luke believes that Adrian is just being careful like most wizards are, especially since his power has remained hidden for most of his life. The protagonist mentally says that he is not being careful. He just didn't like Luke's behavior when he talked about Arcia. At that moment, the inspection ends. Luke gives the protagonist a week to think about his offer. He raises his hand to greet the young master while saying that the Reinhardt Empire will perish if it stays in the hands of the first prince. Adrian promises to reflect on his words. Luke then looks at Arcia and says that she is smaller than he expected for an aura master. They touch hands while the second prince says that it will be a pleasure to duel with the first female aura master. Arcia replies that it will be a pleasure for her too. The protagonist looks at the scene feeling angry. Luke says that Arcia seems to be a cold woman, and after that he says goodbye. The chief inspector approaches Adrian and says that he had better accept the offer because Luke is not used to being rejected. The protagonist walks out of the castle thoughtful. He decides to put his problems aside for a while and asks if Arcia is hungry. She replies that she is a little. Adrian looks at the girl for a few seconds and feels angry, remembering that she shook the prince's hand. Then he tells Arcia that she must wash her hand because a garbage touched her. The girl replies that she has to wash her shoulder too. Adrian says that he knows several restaurants in the capital of Reinhardt, and they can go now. Suddenly, a blonde guy joins the conversation and says that he also knows some restaurants. At first, Adrian doesn't recognize that man. He wears the magic glasses and realizes that he is the first prince. Luke's brother, his name is Michael Reinhardt, a high wizard of the Fifth Circle. His skills are at a high level.
One thing the protagonist noticed is that the first prince is walking around the hall without anyone noticing. Probably he used facial alteration spell. Michael realizes that he was recognized and says that it is expected of an archmage and an aura master. He adds that this spell does not work on people who are not idiots like his brother. On the other hand, Adrian only he can think that Michael doesn't seem like a top-notch prince by the way he's acting right now. But there's one thing that came directly to his mind. He's sure it will be problematic for Michael Reinhardt as his nemesis, so Adrian says he expects at least one lavish dinner from the prince. Michael replies that he'll do it right away and asks to follow him. The protagonist follows the first prince as he tells himself that this guy's stats are too good to be human. His talent leans towards politics and administration, but the protagonist has never seen a person with 3 such high talents, except for Arcia. In reality, if Michael's stats are combined, Roll are better than Arcia's. Arcia's stats were not very high because they were all focused on her skills with the sword. But Michael has 2 high-level skills and 3 very high-level skills. Apparently, the first prince has a low mana, even so he managed to become a powerful mage with his wisdom. At that moment, Michael looks back and says that he knows that the protagonist has many questions about him. Adrian gives a forced smile while saying that it is because Michael is a more mysterious person than his younger brother. The first prince points to the room they must enter. It is a teleportation room. Adrian is surprised because he thought it was not possible to use the teleportation spell inside the castle, since there is an interruption barrier all around it. Michael replies that there is an underground electric stone mine. Sometimes it conflicts with mana, causing interruptions in teleportation spells. At that moment, he presses a button on the controller, and the defensive barrier disappears. The protagonist now feels insecure. The first prince seems stronger than he thought. At this moment, the 3 are teleported to a hall. Michael says that now they can speak freely. But before he activates the interruption spell again, Adrian thinks that the second prince has no idea that the first prince is playing with the security of the castle. There is no way for him to know. At that moment, the 2 shake hands, and the protagonist says that it is a privilege to meet the crown prince. Michael replies that it is also a pleasure to meet the young master Adrian Lawrence and Arcia Klein. Then he asks the butler to prepare some meals for his guests. The man obeys and asks for a moment. The main character asks curiously if this is the crown prince's salon. Michael replies yes. He says that he hired a chef to prepare the best meals. Arcia even dreams of the food. At this moment, Michael fiddles with his watch while telling the protagonist that he follows him on the SNS. He even shows his profile with 4535 followers. Adrian is surprised and says that he did not imagine that the prince would have social networks like this. Michael confesses that most nobles tend to look with contempt at the virtual world, but he likes it a lot and follows some news there. With the little conversation that the protagonist had, he can realize that Michael treats him as his best friend. Despite the title of heir, it seems that he is not just pretending to be someone nice, unlike the second prince. The protagonist concluded that the first prince and the second prince are completely opposite of each other. Adrian and Michael talk while the food is served. They talk about the similarity of their humor. Michael said he laughed at his posts ironizing what happened to Raven. Meanwhile, Arcia starts drooling looking at the food. The protagonist asks if Michael saw the fan club that waited for him at the entrance of the castle. The first prince replies yes, and the 3 finally start eating, while Arcia is busy eating various dishes. Adrian assumes that they were called to this banquet because the first prince is wanting to recruit him. Michael confirms his hypothesis, but unfortunately he has no proposal or offer to make to the protagonist. The only offer he has is not to prevent Adrian from obtaining the title, promised by his brother. He explains that the title of Viscount is not something that is easily obtained. It is even more difficult now that power is divided. He assumes that Luke promised some title even though he doesn't have enough authority to do so. In the end, it's up to the first prince and his allies to agree that he can inherit some title. The protagonist understands what Michael is saying. The reason he can't offer a title as prince is because he knows it's an empty promise. The title can easily disappear if the other party disagrees. This means that the fact that Michael says that he will not prevent him from receiving the title basically means that it will help him get the title. At that moment, Michael says that the protagonist will probably receive the title by joining Prince Luke. When this happens, his allies will not disagree, and Adrian will be able to get the title easily. Then he asks if the young master intends to stay by his side instead of the second prince. The protagonist thinks for a few seconds because he knows that it is the most important card in the game at the moment. Whichever side he chooses will have the advantage. Adrian has 2 options: accept the offer and get the title when he joins the first prince, or refuse the offer and lose his title by uniting with the second prince. Without thinking twice, the protagonist agrees to unite with Michael. The guy is even surprised and asks if he doesn't need some time to think. He replies no, because he is sure that Michael deserves the throne more than the second prince. The first prince says that he hopes the protagonist does not betray him and joins Luke after he gets the title. Adrian just replies that he will never betray a follower of his. The truth is that he is already sure that there is more chance of Michael beating the second prince even without his help. So he only thinks about an advantage of winning a title without any effort. While the 2 are happy with the deal, Arcia continues to eat all the dishes in front of her. Michael asks if she doesn't care which side the protagonist chooses. One of the reasons that Adrian feels safer in supporting the first prince is that he doesn't have a malicious look at Arcia. The protagonist then tries to know if the girl also feels comfortable accepting his new decision. She soon replies that she will follow her master in any choice or wherever he is.
Adrian is embarrassed by these words and almost chokes on the food. Michael begins to say that they make a great couple. The protagonist asks him to stop while his cheeks turn red. The two go back to talking about the plan. Basically, the first prince wants the protagonist to ally with Luke and get the title. But Adrian thinks that Prince Luke will be suspicious if Michael doesn't react to this. The second prince says that it is likely to happen, so he will pretend that he wants to stop and then back off. Adrian thinks that is a good plan, but it won't be enough. So he suggests that Michael take something from the second prince when he wins the title. The protagonist is sure that the guy won't be able to convince Luke not to get something in return. He adds that Raven Magrave has lost 40% of her power due to the conflict of the two, so he thinks Raven no longer deserves the title of Marquis. Michael asks if he is trying to take the title of Marquis from Raven to give him the title of Viscount. The protagonist replies yes, because he will cause a lot of damage alongside Prince Luke when he demotes the title of Raven to Viscount. Michael assumes that opinion may be a bit personal, and Adrian replies that it really is. The first prince asks what will happen if his brother rejects the offer. The protagonist replies that it is enough to elect some of his allies. As Marquis, he adds that he will be able to justify his own title as a reward for my merits in battle. But it is also a good time to promote one of the counts on his side who has also done a lot in battle. Michael is thoughtful while the protagonist is confident that cheating on Luke will maximize his profits. At that moment, he realizes that the first prince has changed his expression, then sees that the man is suspicious of him. He is about to explain himself when Michael interrupts him. The man asks if he could tell who he found on the second prince's side before they met. The protagonist tells about the people he has seen since he arrived at the castle. First, Baron Walker received him. Then he saw Luke and Douglas with 6 inspectors in total. The protagonist met 9 people. At that moment, Michael's expression changes and his status becomes friendly again. Adrian asks if he had the same idea. The prince questions if he happens to read minds and confirms that he really thought about betrayal. It turns out that Michael found it suspicious that the protagonist created a betrayal plan before even talking about any possibility of betrayal. He says that it is incredible that the two thought of the same thing. Michael soon says that he never wants to be the protagonist's enemy because he is very intelligent. Adrian has the same thought. Later that day, dinner ends, and before leaving, the protagonist gets a phone. Michael says that it is a secure device that no one can hack. He intends to contact that device if there is more to discuss. After that, he says goodbye, and the protagonist enters the teleportation portal. He reappears in an unknown location with Arcia and asks if she knows where this is. Arcia replies that it is a warehouse near the first prince's castle. The protagonist likes the place he was sent to and says that Michael is very careful. After that, he asks the girl to follow him. The protagonist leaves the warehouse and finds his subordinates having fun shopping. The men scream in fright and hide the shopping bags behind their backs. Arcia touched the protagonist several times, asking him to look at the store in front of him. It turns out that there are several figurines of Arcia and Adrian being sold. In addition, the store is also selling dolls and even clothes with the photo of the two. Arcia looks at the purchases that the knights hide and realizes that they bought in the store. Her face is stamped on one of the bags. Arcia accuses the two of being otakus. A few days pass, and the news that the economy of the Freusian Empire was bad appeared on social networks. Apparently, the economy that shows signs of inflation is taking a secondary place while the Freus Republic focuses exclusively on its military strength. The hope of the Republic is exclusively in the hands of Louis Fairmont, the man who found the legacy of Archduke Lucas. This news has reached several places, including the palace of the Brangam Empire. The scene changes to the Golden Dragon Castle, and someone shouts that this is not possible. Emperor Edward Noah of the Brigham Empire is angry. He shouted that Archduke Lucas lived in his country all the years he was alive, so his people were bound to find the legacy. Edward scolds his knights, saying that he spent too many resources and they found nothing. The men apologize for this. Edward tries to find out from the Director of Information if Louis really met the fate of Archduke Lucas. The woman called Elfred of the Seventh Circle replies that she has a 50% chance. She looked at the progress of the exploration and saw that they were using an ancient method compared to that of the Brangam Empire. Elfred believes that it makes sense that the destination was found somewhere random that no one has ever looked for, because if it was in a common place, the legacy should have been found 10 or 20 years ago. In addition, she remembers well that Archduke Lucas spread the hints in several texts and used the word English. But Louis didn't mention any of this when he said he found fate. There is no excuse for him to hide this information. The Emperor asks why then she only gave them a 50% chance of being right if he has so many suspicions. Elfred replies that it is because the hints left by Archduke Lucas were only dukes. In addition, someone has already found the true legacy and deceived the Freus Empire to distract others. Edward says that this doesn't make sense because the person who found the true legacy could have simply hidden this fact, instead of thinking of a distraction. Elfred says that he also doesn't know the reason, but they should look at all the possibilities. Edward believes that for a person to possess a true destiny and create a false destiny requires manipulation on a national level. Probably this person must be from one of the 4 nations, Croizen Empire, Elysia Empire, Lucius Kingdom, or in the Reinhardt Kingdom. Edward believes that the highest probability is from the Elysia Kingdom, but he heard that the Reinhardt Kingdom has a lot of news. Elfred says that he saw some information about a young man who reached the 7th circle at the age of 20. He has also amassed assets of trillions in cash through investments.
Edward says that this boy's talent is suspect, but anyway finds it difficult for him to have found destiny. Alfred reminds the Emperor that the Lucius Empire accepted this young master as one of their own, not to mention that many stock exchanges have testified that there is nothing wrong with investing him, but there is also no evidence that Adrian is the owner of the legacy. Edward is surprised. He doesn't think anyone can surpass Archduke Lucas. But he can't just give up on the idea that this kid is talented. Edward even thinks that the conflicting situation in Reinhardt's kingdom may be to deceive them. Alfred thinks it's more advantageous to focus on Alicia's empire. In the Lucius kingdom, the kingdom of Reinhardt, and the empire of Kreuzen, Edward agrees with her and says that in that case his men must increase the watchfulness of the order in the four empires. Kings and even nobles must be watched. In addition, Edward demands that a strong warning be sent to the Freudian Empire. Archduke Luke's legacy is clearly the property of the Brigham nation. So, Edward says that he will consider their action as a definitive theft. If Froist does not return the destination, then they used force. The command is given to all the soldiers and they leave the castle. Edward is willing to destroy a nation to take that legacy. Before Alfred can leave, the Emperor asks her to contact Reinhardt's young master and give an immigration. The man says that it will be better for Adrian to be a count of his empire than any king of the Reinhardt Empire. Meanwhile, in another castle, several young people talk about what happened in the Reinhardt kingdom. They accuse the protagonist of being a lunatic who watched his stepmother and brother explode like fireworks. After that, he posted a photo on his social networks drinking wine as if nothing had happened. The young people seem even more incredulous when they discover that Adrian was a disciple of Duke Keen Riverdale. He even received the blessing of Professor Riverdale's daughter. The heirs seem bothered by the fact that Adrian is talented and still has an aura master by his side. At this moment, a pink-haired girl says she doesn't know why they are so worried. In her view, Marquis Raven lost because he commanded his troops like an idiot. This girl is called Isabella Cascabel, the eldest daughter of the Marquis of Cascabel. The boys ask if she is not worried. After all, she was the one who bothered this young master. Isabella says that the protagonist will not have a rematch just because he got some allies. She thinks there is no reason to tremble with fear because of a great mage and a master of the aura. A great wizard can be eliminated by an air defense, and aura masters can be eliminated with many vanguards. In addition, Isabella reminds the heirs that they have many important allies, so they should not underestimate their own power. Everyone agrees with her, but one of the boys thinks that it will be difficult to cause any direct damage. If Adrian receives the title of Count, Isabella says that among so many high-ranking nobles, Adrian is the least afraid. The young masters say she is right and praise her intelligence. At that moment, Isabella receives a text message on her watch and soon says goodbye. She says that her father needs her. Her friends say goodbye and tells her to come back as soon as she is free. Isabella leaves the salon. On the way, she remembers the protagonist, the silver-haired boy she met in her childhood. In the first years of life, the two had no problems. The conflict began during the time they were studying at the academy. The protagonist did not like to see Isabella beating one of the students. She was accompanied by the same young masters we saw just now. Isabella justified it by saying that she was hitting the girl because she was a commoner. Adrian helped the girl while telling Isabella that one day he would make her go through that situation. But it would be 1,000 times worse. The protagonist promised that he would make her regret being born. At that moment, Isabella laughs at the memories they have. She confesses that she thought Adrian's face was beautiful when he got angry, but now she only feels sorry because he will never be someone important. The scene changes to a few minutes later. Isabella screams, asking if her father is serious. Her father is called Cascabel and is part of the group that supports Luke. He told his daughter that the second prince promised the title of Marquis to Adrian. Isabella asks how it is possible for a Marquis to appear out of nowhere, being the son of a concubine and a viscount. Cascabel replies that Luke is confident that Mr. Lawrence is worth it. He is too, because Adrian reached the 7th circle at the age of 20. He will easily be able to become a great 8th circle mage in the future. Plus, the young master still has a talented aura master. Cascabel thinks that Adrian's influence is enough to balance their side. It will be good to have him on the team. That's why Cascabel asks Isabella to build a good friendship with this boy. In fact, the best decision would be if she could marry him. Isabella is about to go crazy with this information. She knows she won't be able to deal with the protagonist when he becomes the 6th Marquis of Reinhardt. Count and Marquis are only a degree of difference, but the political weight is incomparable. Without many options, she runs back to the hall and gets the attention of her friends. But they use so many narcotics that they didn't even care about her. That scene becomes clear to Isabella that her allies are useless. The next day, the protagonist entered with his supports in the Chronicle. This time, Arcia changed his hair color and his armor. Thanks to the update of his character, the first thing the protagonist did when he returned to the palace was to create a disguise for Arcia. She was very famous in the last few days. Maybe that way she could calm things down. Later, Adrian attended a meeting with Perseus. The captain's son soon questioned if the protagonist was planning to enter the military industry. The father scolds him, telling him to speak properly with the young master Lawrence. Adrian wears his glasses on the boy and realizes that he has 3 high-level skills, as expected of the son of Perseus. The boy talks about the investment that Adrian will make. At first, the opinion of the two is the same. The protagonist knows that he cannot spend money on limited things such as mining and distribution, so his intention is to invest in the military area. The guy says that he is expected of a great wizard, but asks what items Adrian is thinking of buying. Perseus sighs deeply, realizing that he can't stop his son's curiosity. The boy justified his question by saying that he thinks it's necessary to keep in mind what to prioritize to follow young Lawrence's orders. Adrian smiles and says that they will start with the vanguard equipment. Perseus asks, curious if this is possible. The protagonist replies that he already has the principle of the force system and an approximate method of manufacturing the equipment of the vanguard. So it is possible as long as the auxiliaries follow the instructions. Currently, the production of vanguard equipment is shared between 3 families in the kingdom of Reinhardt: the maternal family of the Duke of Enerheim, the maternal family of the current King of Haines, lastly has the family called the House of the Reinhardts. This means that the equipment of the vanguard is being made by the hands of the most powerful in the kingdom. So to match up, Adrian will have to at least be able to produce vanguard force equipment. The son of Perseus seems concerned because vanguard force equipment is not something that anyone can manufacture. No matter how great a wizard you are, the protagonist already knew, there are 4 great mages in the kingdom of Reinhardts. But only 2 of them can manufacture the equipment. Adrian knows that he will attract attention being a 20-year-old sorcerer who appeared out of nowhere and manufactured vanguard equipment. He will certainly attract the attention of the public. In any case, the protagonist says that he will not be satisfied with only avant-garde equipment, so he asks Perseus to let him know when he has a good magic tower for sale. Perseus' son is surprised by those words. His eyes lit up, realizing that Adrian was talking about an air fortress. Without wasting time, they started looking for a magic tower. Later that day, Adrian told his father about the title of Marquis he will receive for supporting the second prince. He thought about saying that he was actually next to the first prince, but he knows that it is better to keep this agreement a secret. Sylvia says she is worried because this title is very powerful. The protagonist says that everything is fine. His mother was a hostess to a viscount for a long time, but still cares about the titles. Adrian says that Marquis is a very important name, really. You need to at least become king of a country and build a harem to be satisfied. Rayford and Sylvia scold you with their eyes. The protagonist doesn't understand why they have that expression. Sylvia asks how her son can talk about a harem when his girlfriend is by his side. Adrian finally realizes what caused the confusion. It turns out that he lied, saying that Arshia was his fiancée just to keep her around without raising questions. But he ended up forgetting about this lie he made up, so the protagonist tells his parents that it was just a joke. The mother replies that she didn't like the joke. Adrian is sure that Arshia didn't care about the joke and was about to confirm it, but her mood didn't seem so pleasant. The girl soon returns to her normal mood, thinking that he hadn't noticed. Sylvia tells him not to joke about it. The protagonist replies that he won't do it again and wonders internally what he just saw. Adrian changes the subject as his cheeks turn red with embarrassment as he remembers Arshia's status. He soon announces that he wants to finish the job he started. His goal is to eliminate the servants who sided with Anna and Cedric in the past. The servants who directly injured him must be the first to be punished. Adrian even gives a pleasant smile saying this, but his face soon darkens with anger. Meanwhile, at Reinhardt's royal palace, Luke tries to convince his father that Adrian deserves the title of Marquis, justifying that the young master is a rare genius who became a wizard at the age of 20. He is also an expert in economics who has earned tens of trillions of wealth alone. Not to mention that Adrian played a very important role during the battle. He was recognized by the greatest soldiers. To top it off, his fiancée is an aura master. So he is sure that Adrian should occupy a noble title. Luke still says that many countries are trying to get closer to him because they covet his talents. Some are saying that he will become the next Archmage Lucas. Michael follows the plan he created with the protagonist and rebuts his brother's lines, saying that in 200 years there has been no one who could equal Archduke Lucas. He makes it clear that he will not benefit his brother and support his idea. Luke grits his teeth angrily. Michael says that he can accept to pass the title he wants to Adrian, but on one condition: Raven will have to lose his title and be demoted. Marquis Raven was sitting at that table and was silent when he heard his name mentioned. Luke refuses to do this because he doesn't want to lose any support. The first prince expected that decision from Luke. That's when he starts the second plan. Michael says he wants Count Otis, who participated in the battle along with young Lawrence, to receive the title of Marquis. Otis can't help but be surprised. The first prince justifies his proposal by saying that he really can't deny that the protagonist made great contributions to the battle. But it's no exaggeration to say that half of the credit belongs to his superior Otis. That's his proposal not to demote Raven. The king finally joins the conversation and accepts his son Michael's request. Luke has no objection. A few days later, the scene changes to the day of the victory celebration at the royal palace. Adrian was invited with his family. Sylvia was embarrassed because she looked very neat. But the young master said that she looked great, and probably wouldn't even be recognized by the nobles as a noble woman, so it wouldn't be a problem. Sylvia turns her attention to Arshia and says that she is sure she would look beautiful in the dress. But the support replies that he doesn't like this style very much. The truth is that she prefers to be in uniform like Adrian. Sylvia reminds her that they are in an official ceremony. If she wants to change clothes, she can do it before entering the hall. While the two talk, those nobles who were participating in the banquet with Isabella are scared to see the protagonist. Adrian quickly recognizes the delinquents of the nobility. The first is Viscount Doherty, the second is Viscount Parma. The third girl is called Karma, and the last is Ronier. The protagonist mockingly says that he missed these familiar faces and questions where their master is.
It seems that they are still together even after they have grown up. Ronier replies that Isabella will come later. Adrian turns his back and tells the family to enter the palace. Sylvia asks if these young people are her friends, and Adrian replies that they are just former classmates from the academy. At that moment, the group feels a murderous pressure on them. This pressure came from Archia's gaze. Karma feels that the protagonist has not forgotten them and hopes that Isabella will solve this. Archia soon asks her master if he should murder this group. Adrian replies that he has not yet. He promised a few years ago that he would do it at the right time. At that moment, the Lawrence family is received by a butler. They enter the royal hall and are placed in the front row seats. This catches the attention of the other nobles, and they recognize the Lawrence family. In a few seconds, Sylvia and Rayford are surrounded. The nobles praise their clothes and the jewelry they are wearing. Adrian assumes that all these high-ranking nobles know the news of his new title. At that moment, Marquis Raven enters the hall. He casts a look of fear towards the protagonist and walks away. Adrian realizes that the man is keeping his distance, probably because he was scolded by the second prince. A few hours later, the celebration of the Reinhardt family begins. Otis received the title of Marquis and won the City Order of the Golden Lion. The protagonist watched the scene and realized that Otis is also on the side of the crown prince. Suddenly, his attention falls on the second prince. He feels that Luke is whispering about him to another nobleman. The man next to him is definitely the most famous sword master in the kingdom, Marquis Vincent. It is clear that the eyes of the two men are directed to Archia. It seems that the aura masters in this country are very interested in her. This makes Adrian angry. At that moment, the king asks him and Archia to go up to the front. Adrian was given the title of Marcus and the Marienkoff area as his estate. Archia Klein was given the title of Countess and the area of Glendale as his estate. The king also gives each of the two new owners a perforated fortress. He says he is hopeful that the two will make the best defense in the country. Adrian thanks him. While the nobles are surprised by his new title, Reinhardt's king asks if Adrian has anything to say. First, the protagonist thanks his majesty for the title, then the crown prince and the second prince for understanding. The protagonist adds that he has something to do now, that he has become an aristocrat with territory and wishes to clarify his desire in front of everyone present here. At this moment, he mentions the names of the four nobles who were part of his childhood, then declares conflict against the four families. No one expected this. King Reinhardt and the second prince look horrified. The protagonist's parents are also scared. Kalitz is the king of the Reinhardt Empire. He had a growing concern in these last days called successor. The man was torn between the crown prince and the second prince. This was enough to make Kalitz have a headache, but everything got worse when the protagonist declared that he would end up with Doherty, Parma, Karma, and Ronier. Now the king feels that a new lunatic has appeared in this country. Luke calls the protagonist to talk privately and confesses that he thought he was a quiet man, but he has just shown himself to be aggressive. He questions if Adrian does not know that a new lord cannot expand his territory for a year. The protagonist replies that he intends to destroy those four families and return the territory to the royal family. Luke asks if he has really decided to go all the way, and Adrian replies that he is. The second prince touches the protagonist's shoulder before he leaves the room and says that his attitude disappointed him. Adrian imagined that he would cause this reaction. He returns to the hall and realizes that the royal party has already begun. Archia approaches saying that she was waiting for him. The nobles begin to distance themselves from the two. At first, Adrian was surrounded and flattered, but now it seems that no noble wants to be seen with him. The protagonist says that he is feeling like a scoundrel. His father soon says that he is a scoundrel. Adrian apologizes for exaggerating. Viscount Rayford asks why he went so far and declared a territorial battle. The young master says it's a rematch. Rayford reminds him that fighting with four families at the same time is dangerous. The protagonist says he doesn't have to worry. The father takes a deep breath and says he trusts him. Sylvia just looks at the two worried. Rayford says that they should enjoy the royal family's party, then looks at Sylvia calling her wife and invites her to dance. The woman accepts. The protagonist looks delighted at the parents' scene. Rayford had to stay away from Sylvia all this time because of Anna. But now it seems that no one else can stop them. The protagonist says that he must continue the work, now that his parents are well. Outside the royal hall, a fight is going on between the four nobles who were threatened. Ronier thinks that Adrian's anger is because of the childish attitudes they had when they were children. Parma says that the best thing to do now is for the four families to unite. The enemy is a marquis who has just received the title. Maybe they will be able to win if they join forces. Kama says that it is totally possible. The protagonist appears behind her and asks if they think it is really possible. The nobles are scared. Adrian says that from today they should not call him by his first name. Parma replies that there is no way to show respect for the one who just created a territorial conflict. The protagonist removes his gloves while saying that he will teach them about respect. The gloves are thrown at the nobleman's face and Adrian invites him to a duel. Suddenly a voice says that he is not allowed to do this. The protagonist looks at the voice and realizes that they are the heads of the four families. Parma's father says that the boy must abide by the prescribed laws and not start a fight suddenly. Adrian laughs and says that he would leave Parma's family out of the conflict if the boss supported the duel and saw his son's head flying. The man replies that he doesn't know what kind of bad relationship they have.
but thinks Adrian is going a little too far. The protagonist replies that he is not going too far at all. He just wants the revenge he is entitled to. The boss asks his son what the protagonist means. Parma remains silent while trembling. The protagonist turns his back, saying that the letter announcing the conflict should arrive within a week. If the boss doesn't want his family to fall because of his son's stupid attitude, just take Parma and give it to him. The boss asks if the protagonist really thinks he's going to sell his own son. Adrian casts a glance towards the man and notices Isabella hiding behind the leaders. He understands that Parma won't be handed over and says that the boss just has to wait for the battle. After saying that he leaves, the boss looks angrily at his son and says that they will talk about what happened. Parma starts to tremble as she yells for Isabella to explain to her father. The girl is frozen in place. She has not recovered from the look she received from Adrian. Later that day, the news spread quickly. Adrian was in the headlines once again. This time, people commented that the new Marquise declared conflict against 4 families. The public supported Adrian's decision, saying that he was probably intimidated by those damn nobles. The protagonist didn't expect to receive so much support. He says he was even moved. At this moment, Adrian is brought back to reality. The knight in front of him informed the specifications of the air fortresses that can be sent immediately. The protagonist looks carefully at the catalog. All those fortresses exceed tens of trillions in money, now that he has started a territorial conflict. Nothing fairer than setting up a powerful military base. So the protagonist decides to spend whatever price it takes to assemble a strong military power. He had a total of $48 trillion. But the total value could rise to $70 trillion if Adrian sold the properties that belonged to Raven and Anna. In addition, the things of his brother Cedric could also be sold. At this point, the knight asks if he is really going to buy the fortresses. The protagonist confirms, and the man says that he must pay at least half before. Adrian has doubts if he is exempt from income tax. The knight confirms, and the two shake hands, closing the deal. In total, the protagonist bought 8 air fortresses and 20 trillion of money was left in his wallet. The deal was closed, and Adrian leaves the meeting room. On the way, he meets Mr. Otis. They are both surprised by each other's presence. Otis refers to the protagonist as Marquise. Adrian laughs and says that now Otis is also a Marquise. The man soon asks what he came here to do. The protagonist replies that he just bought some floating fortresses. Otis then realizes that he will have to wait a while to buy his own fortresses. Since Adrian took everything, Otis remembers that he did not introduce Michelle and says that this is his daughter. The protagonist expected to find a lunatic girl, as the rumor said. But Michelle proved to be very charming and bowed as a sign of respect to the young master. Adrian introduced Arcia as his fiancée. Then he turns his attention to Michelle and realizes that the girl has nothing to do with the rumors. Then he takes a look at her status wearing magic glasses. At that moment, something catches his attention. One of the girl's abilities is English interpretation. The last time the protagonist heard the word English was when he was researching Archduke Lucas. He freezes in surprise. Otis warns that his daughter until recently was working hard to find out the fate of Archduke Lucas, but unfortunately someone from the Republic Frius arrived first. Otis adds that his daughter is depressed, and that's why he takes her everywhere. Michelle screams that she is sure that the legacy that Louis found is fake after the protagonist saw that the girl's skill is English interpretation. He is sure that she would find the true destiny if he didn't have the key to cheating because he was born on Earth. Michelle justifies her thought by saying that the destination must be hidden in a place that no one knows. So she doesn't accept that someone from the Republic Frius found it so easily. The protagonist questions where she thinks the true legacy could be. The girl says she's not sure, but assumes that it's somewhere where no nobleman could be. One of the words that Archduke Lucas repeated several times in his letters was Hollywood, but the nobles usually think of Hollywood as a virtual reality system. For some reason, Michelle thought differently. This is what makes the protagonist wonder who this girl is. Michelle asks if she can add him to continue keeping in touch. Adrian agrees and looks for the girl's name on his communication clock. Meanwhile, Michelle says that she admires the protagonist and his fiancée Arcia a lot. Maybe they can continue talking another day. The protagonist says he will send an invitation as soon as possible, and they say goodbye. Soon after, Otis and his daughter enter the teleportation zone. Arcia asks if she can end this girl, and the protagonist replies that she still can't. Meanwhile, Michelle shows her father that she and Adrian now follow each other on social media. Adrian knows he will need to keep an eye on this girl for a while. The scene changes to a meeting that takes place at the House of Parma. The leaders of the 4 families hear the new information about Adrian. According to the news, the young master Lawrence bought 8 celestial fortresses, 400 units of exclusive equipment from the Vanguard, 8 high-speed combat ships for the Vanguard with a capacity of 50 people, and 100 teleportation artifacts. The butler adds that Adrian bought 4,000 effect armor and 4,000 swords for knights, as well as 20 medium-sized transport ships with 500 seats. The leaders are frightened, realizing that the protagonist bought a list of military armaments in a single day. One of them shouts that brat has gone crazy. No one would spend 70 trillion on weapons if they didn't really think about a conflict. Viscount Doherty says it's actually 140 trillion to be exact, since he paid 70 trillion in advance and will pay the rest in installments. At first, the leaders thought Adrian was bluffing, but now it's clear that he's going to attack. Miss Ranier finally joins the conversation. She thinks that Adrian should not be underestimated, mainly because he is about to become an archmage. So the best option is to see him as an enemy. At this point, the butler remembers that before Adrian received the title of Marquis, he published a knighthood slot on the SNS app. There were almost 4,000 comments from people saying they wanted to work with him on the ad. Kama's father thinks this is absurd and asks how someone can post something like this when he hadn't even received the title yet. Another question that arises is if Adrian hired stewardesses for the air fortresses. The butler replies, no, but he learned that Marcus Adrian acquired a magic tower and an artifact production company today, so it may be that his plan is to use celestial mages and technicians. In the end, all leaders understand that Countess Ranya's vision is right. This is worrying because the enemy is an archmage and his fiancée is an aura master. A unilateral defeat will probably occur. Viscount Doherty thinks he can gain allies if Adrian has help from nearby territories. Certainly, the royal family will not tolerate it if this happens. Ranye shouts that Adrian does not care about the opinion of the royal family. After all, he has created a conflict in front of his majesty. The bosses begin to tremble when they realize that there will be no way out. Suddenly, Parma's father shouts to bring that idiot. The butler does not understand what he is asking. The Viscount says he wants to see the person responsible for all this mess. The next day, Adrian is at his estate in the metropolitan city of Marinkov. He finds the buildings ahead interesting and comments to Arcia that he is feeling like a great lord. At that moment, Pesius approaches, asking what he thinks of the newly formed group of knights. Adrian says that they seem reasonable. Pesius replies that it is a miracle to create a troop of knights in such a short time, but it is expected from a disciple of Kind Riverdale. The man praises Adrian's great perception. The protagonist says that all this is thanks to everyone who said they wanted to work with him and came here. It is a relief that many people see him in a positive way. At that moment, a woman who accompanied Pesius said that really her people were surprised by Adrian's intelligence. This woman is the head of security for the city of Marinkov and the leader of the troop of knights. She is Baroness Helena. The woman thanks the protagonist for bringing a large amount of military supplies, including air fortresses and avant-garde equipment. Even the knights were prepared in advance. Adrian feels lucky to have so much support from important people. Pesius and Helena say that they are the lucky ones. The protagonist soon asks if the head of security thinks that the knights can be sent to the territorial battle immediately. Pesius and Helena think that it is okay to do that. Suddenly, a loud noise coming from the sky catches their attention. The air fortresses have just arrived. The fortresses vary from first generation to last generation. The protagonist preferred them to be all last generation, but these fortresses are gifts from royalty, so he should not refuse. At this moment, he warns the chiefs that they are leaving. Helena and Pesius do not understand anything. Adrian says that the territorial battle will begin. The preparations should be finished in 3 hours and the knights should be divided into 4 groups. Adrian adds that he and Arcia will capture territory by territory. Pesius hesitates because they need permission from royalty. The protagonist says that it is only a matter of time, but permission will be given anyway, so they will use the excuse that it is training. The protagonist says that this time he will enter the battle directly with Arcia and show his military power. As Adrian prepared for battle, the leaders of the 4 families scolded their children, some were beaten while others begged for forgiveness. On the other hand, the protagonist feels happier than ever, ready to finish off his past enemies. A few hours later, in Pharma County, the villagers rushed for their lives. They knew that Adrian would attack soon. But one girl in particular was not afraid. She sat quietly in a restaurant while everyone else was desperate. This girl is the Elfrid. She was ordered by Emperor Edward to approach the protagonist. But I didn't know that he was going to declare conflict as soon as he got the title of Marquis. Now Elfrid wants to know if this guy is a lunatic or an eccentric person with a plan in mind. Elfrid had a title equivalent to that of Count, so she was someone important in the Brinkham Empire. At that moment, someone recognizes her. It was Duchess Olivia Riverdale. They stare at each other for a few seconds in silence. The scene changes to Adrian's estate in the metropolitan city of Marinkov. Parma's father went to meet him and asked in fear why his military troops were stationed in Pharma County. The protagonist laughs, saying that it is just training. The Viscount does not believe those words. Adrian says that he did not attack his county. Then there is nothing for him to fear. In addition, the protagonist adds that he defends the law and will not attack until he receives permission. The Viscount asks, worried, if he intends to attack when permission is granted. Adrian says that, of course, but for now his army is only training in his county. The Viscount shouts that this is an act that goes against morality. The protagonist wonders what this man understands about morals. After all, his son intimidated several students from childhood to adulthood. The Viscount is sure that permission for this territorial fight will not be granted because it is a petty fight that happened in his school days. At that moment, Lawrence's clock beeps, and he uses magic to leave his enemies silent. On the other end of the line, a person informs that permission for the territorial battle has been granted. The protagonist laughs while saying that the royal family has a different opinion than the Viscount. The man is desperate, wondering if they were abandoned by the royal family. Adrian says that maybe it is because he is more valuable to the family. The Viscount soon begs him to think carefully and not attack. The protagonist says that the only way for the Pharma territory to survive is to surrender. Other than that, there is no other way to avoid this battle. After these words, Perseus created a teleportation portal. The magic spell was activated. The air fortress and the vanguard troop received permission to act. The goal is the fall of Pharma County. The army begins to act. Adrian soon asks if the Viscount will not return. The man realizes that he really has no other option. He runs back to his county. The protagonist turns his attention to Arcia and extends his hand to her. Both hold hands and then warns that he and Arcia will join directly on the front line. The command will be up to Perseus. The man is incredulous and tries to understand if he is serious. The protagonist just enters the teleportation portal. The vanguard troop receives the information that Adrian and Arcia will join them. The scene changes to Pharma County. The residents realized that the sky had darkened, and when they looked ahead, they saw a giant fortress. Adrian was prepared for his revenge. Until that moment, most of his enemies had been eliminated. Anna and Cedric were the first. Now there are the villains of the Academy. The protagonist feels that the eradication of the existence of these people can be considered the starting point of his new future. Adrian holds the staff while saying that he wants to see with his own eyes the enemies being eradicated. At this moment, some places suffer explosions due to the blessed artifices of the protagonist. Parma heard the noise and asked his knights if they will do nothing. The leader replies that the enemy's strength alone is greater than theirs twice, not to mention that the enemies are an archmage and an aura master. To be honest, the chances are almost nil. Parma is desperate when he hears this. The leader of the vanguard just says that he can give her advice. He advises Parma to go to Adrian and be murdered by him so his people can survive. After all, the reason for this conflict was Parma, and he must pay alone. Parma asks how the knight can say this to his young master. The man gets angry and says that everyone in the castle thinks the same. Parma has always been wicked, and now he has put everyone's lives at risk. The knight adds that his young master must pay for everything he did. After all, he has already taken the lives of at least 10 people. So Parma is only reaping what he sowed. Parma disagrees. He doesn't think he was such a bad person. In his head, the fault is all Adrian's with no other option. The boy asks the commander of the vanguard to take him away. His strategy is to ask for help from other territories. Suddenly, the knight hands over vanguard equipment. He tells Parma to dress and face his opponent head-on like a man. The boy looks terrified while the commander says that this is the Viscount's order. Parma shouts that he will never follow this order. The image of the protagonist saying that it will make him regret being born passes through his mind. Parma begins to cry as the commander forces him to put on his armor. The boy puts on his clothes and walks with the other vanguards. The commander tried to calm the situation by saying that even though Marquis Lawrence is an archmage, a mage is still a mage, and a vanguard armed with force gear should be able to stand up to him. Parma didn't find those words comforting. The knight knew, but he said that because if he hides there will only be one result. So his plan is for Parma to take advantage of the avant-garde equipment, while lowering the guard of Marquis Lawrence, opening an opportunity to attack him fatally. As Adrian has no wife and no successor, the battle will end when he is assassinated. This would also give Parma the title of Hero of the Shire. The guy is encouraged by those words and says he will finish off the protagonist. Then he will punish everyone who turned their backs on him. The vanguard is ready to take the punishment if he does indeed defeat the Marquis. Parma is trusting that it will be easy to defeat a mage. His confidence was short-lived because he received a cut on his face as soon as he arrived on the battlefield. The protagonist was not even aiming at him. In fact, Adrian made a move with his artifact, and it was enough to injure several of his enemies from meters away. Parma feels from afar the power of an archmage and an aura master. He says that it can only be a joke that the commander wants him to face that thing. At that moment, the commander of the vanguard of Pharma County jumps with his sword to hit Adrian. The other knights accompany him in the attack. The protagonist jumps to the ground and sends lightning bolts to the enemies around his body. The men are electrocuted. Suddenly, a flying fortress from Pharma County finally appears. An aerial confrontation begins. Parma realizes that he is at a disadvantage. At this moment, the protagonist approaches him and says he is surprised. He thought that Parma would be hiding. The commander of the vanguard soon pushes the boy to solve his conflict alone. Parma takes a few steps with her trembling legs and calls Adrian to a duel. Lawrence can't hide his surprise. The boy says he shouldn't back down if he's a real man. Suddenly, the protagonist snaps his finger and tells him to stop being pathetic. In the same second, an explosion of magic passes through Parma's arm, like a blade. The guy falls to the ground, screaming in pain as a red liquid splashes from his body. Adrian laughs, saying that he spent $70 trillion in installments to buy various weapons. He intends to pay this amount with someone's treasury. Parma hears this and asks if he means that he is here to take his family's money. The protagonist replies that he will do that too. At first, he just wanted to punish Parma, but now he is going to take the treasure. Parma is scared watching Adrian's Black Eagle. The protagonist calls his attention and says that he has a bone in his body called the humerus. He also has an important bone in the back. Parma asks why Lawrence is saying this out of nowhere. Adrian replies that it was these bones that Parma broke in his body when they were children. He could forget that incident if it was just a few bones, but his mind was tormented by that episode, so he wants revenge. Arcia appears behind Adrian and pulls the sword. The protagonist stops it with his hand while saying that Parma will not have a peaceful end. Then he uses healing magic on the enemy. Adrian's vanguard surrounds the enemies. The Pharma County vanguard are captured. Parma is also captured, and he yells for the protagonist to forgive him. Adrian looks at the enemy vanguard. The commander tries to be nice to survive, but the protagonist just laughs. 30 minutes later, the battle between Marquis Lawrence and Pharma County came to an end. The scene shifts to the past, when Alfred asks if Olivia is there because now Marquise Adrian is from the Riverdale family's social circle, or if by any chance she has doubts about Adrian. Olivia replies with a smile on her face that Alfred should not interpret strangely. Adrian really is part of her social circle, but now she wants to know what the head of the intelligence department of the Brigham Empire is doing here, although the two girls seem smiling at each other. In fact, they hate each other and are holding each other back, so there is no aggression. The two come to a consensus that it is not worth fighting. The best thing is to know how Adrian is doing in the fight. Both use the teleportation portal and respawn in a nearby building. Olivia is surprised to see the protagonist fighting at close range. Alfred didn't expect to see this. She knows that the big reason mages' movements are limited on modern battlefields is not because of compatibility with the Vanguard. It's because movements are slow. Many mages were eliminated by the Vanguard exactly because of this. But Adrian's fight is different. He doesn't even use the teleportation spell to dodge enemies. Alfred asks what the girl thinks of it. Olivia replies that Adrian seems to have a lot of combat experience. A good physique and battle sense, not just any mage could fight like that. Alfred says that Olivia has an amazing wizard. The girl just tells her not to be interested in her people. Alfred says it's a shame because she liked him in many ways. She turns her back to leave after seeing everything she wanted from the battle. Olivia is also pleased with what she saw. The truth is that she came here to confirm her talents and is happy. Olivia also decides to leave before being noticed, but it was already too late because Crowe shared his vision with the protagonist. Thanks to this, Adrian knew that Olivia and Alfred were watching him. At that moment, a Vanguard asked to look that way. Suddenly, one of the windows of the building next door suffers an explosion. Adrian enters the room where the Viscount is. Parma's father yells at him not to approach. Suddenly, the Viscount loses his balance and falls. The protagonist pretends to hit him between the legs and stops. The Viscount asks what he intends to do with his family. Adrian is direct and says that he does not intend to punish anyone but the culprit. He just wants the Pharma family to declare decline. The Viscount cries as he says he will sign. The battle lasted 30 minutes, and after that the Viscount declared that Pharma County had collapsed during the conflict with Marquis Lawrence. Now everyone knew that the battle was basically over, but there were 3 families left. Adrian's Vanguard headed to Doherty County and started demolishing the buildings. The Viscount asks the other 2 leaders for help to stop his territory from being invaded. They consider giving up their own children to stop the attack, but Ranye knew it wouldn't help. She learned that Adrian captured Parma and still invaded his family's castle. This means that from the beginning, the protagonist used the revenge as an excuse to subjugate the 4 territories. Ranye was sure that he wanted the treasure of the 4 families to pay the debt he has with the royal family. The other 2 leaders have nothing to do but surrender their territory. The woman says that it is really the last alternative, but first they must use the last method. At that moment, the Vanguard of the Ranye family reports. The Vanguard of the Karma family also arrives in the teleportation area. The commander of Doherty's cavalry reports. His name is Dennis. All 3 Vanguards are in their positions waiting for permission to execute the plan. There are 15 seconds left for the start. A countdown begins. After that, the Vanguard is teleported to the territory in which the protagonist is. They look around and notice that the enemy is ahead. Adrian and Arcia were waiting for them inside the floating ship. Without wasting time, the protagonist casts his spell while looking happily at the enemies. Suddenly, a magic circle covers the 3 Vanguards. Dennis is sure that their plan has been discovered. The man thought he would be eliminated right there, but the protagonist's magic just took him to an open field. It didn't take long for the enemies to realize that they were surrounded by Adrian's army. Soldiers and Vanguardists watched them. The scene changes to a few minutes before the enemy Vanguard arrives. The protagonist was with his team on the floating ship when he warned that they were coming. Pesius jokes, asking if he has clairvoyant power. Adrian replies that it is a simple prediction. He creates the magic circles using the artifact while saying that this is not a bad strategy for them. Suddenly, the enemies of the Vanguard appear in the air facing Adrian and his team. The protagonist directs the artifact at them and says that he has prepared a welcome ceremony for everyone. After that, the Vanguard was teleported to a field and found itself surrounded by Lawrence's soldiers. Adrian demands that they drop their weapons and surrender. Everyone will stay alive if they do this. Suddenly, Dennis starts shouting that the battle will end if they eliminate Marquise Adrian. The protagonist did not imagine that this would be the attitude of the Doherty Vanguard. Pesius worries because there are 3 Vanguards from 3 counties. Before the protagonist thinks about defending himself, Arcia takes the lead of him. The Vanguardists attack. Dennis jumps above the protagonist's head, saying that he better surrender, but is pushed away by a magic circle. The protagonist gives up, treating them in the best way, so he sends several spheres of fire at the men. The flame explosion spell is activated. Dennis looks ahead in fear and realizes that he will not be able to dodge. Then his only alternative is to stop the attack with the sword. At that moment, the knight cuts the explosion of flames. Apparently, he was fine and was not involved in the fire, but the protagonist rushed to attack as soon as the flames were over. Dennis sends some bombs from the Vanguard equipment, but the bullet ricocheted off the defense wall created by Adrian. The knight does not believe that his bullet was stopped by a simple magic shield. He has never met a wizard as powerful as this. Adrian laughs and says that Dennis is not the only one to say this today. After these words, a last scream was heard, accompanied by red liquid. A few days after the end of the battle, Adrian read all the articles about him at his home. The news said that the conflict was over in less than a day. After the protagonist eliminated the 3 vanguards, he captured the 3 leaders of the 3 families. His victory resulted in favorability of the soldiers and knights. At that moment, Adrian's thoughts were interrupted by Arcia. The girl complained that she was hungry. Behind her, the maid warns that Arcia has already eaten and needs to shower before entering Adrian's room. They continue to argue. The protagonist is happy that the maid Catherine has adapted well to Arcia. He called her a few days ago, when the territorial battle came to an end. Catherine was one of the students who was bullied along with Adrian in the past by that group of nobles. The protagonist took her to personally receive the apology. In fact, Catherine began to be bullied after helping Adrian. The protagonist promised her that he would also make Isabella Cascabel and Philo Brooks apologize to her. Catherine didn't want to meet those people again, but Adrian couldn't let their suffering go in vain. So he healed her and said that from today on they will be happy. After that, Catherine went to Adrian's property and was responsible for Arcia. The protagonist asks how she is feeling about living here. Catherine smiles and says that every day in this house is amazing. Adrian finally feels that his battle has had results. He is happy that Catherine is better. Later, the protagonist received a special guest at his new estate. Michael was completely happy for Adrian's support. His ascension to the throne is more favorable after he subjugated the 3 families that supported the second prince. The protagonist reminds him that one of the families that supported the first prince was also erased. Michael thinks it's not a problem to lose the support of a single family, since his brother lost the support of 3. He soon asks if the protagonist received any message from Luke after what he did. Adrian replies that he didn't, but the second prince seemed very bitter. He said that Count Brooks and Marquis Cascabel also committed the same sins as the 4 viscounts, but the protagonist should restrain himself for his sake. After all, the second prince needed the support to ascend to the throne. Anyway, Luke said he would let it go. Michael says that now it doesn't matter much because the second prince has already lost a lot of support, but he intends to win the succession in a complete and sweeping way. The protagonist knows what the first prince is talking about. If the national power becomes unstable due to a new battle, the enemy Croatian Empire will be able to reveal its ambitions again. That's why the protagonist accepted to betray the second prince. In this way, Michael can have his complete and sweeping victory. Adrian asks what the next plan will be. The first prince replies that he needs time to think, but the protagonist is bothered and the guy asks if he has a problem. Adrian replies, annoyed that the second prince continues to flirt with his Arcia. He doesn't know how long he will endure that situation without ending up with Luke. Michael apologizes for his brother's actions. His confidence has become a little excessive since he became an aura master. Luke tends to think that any woman would fall madly in love with him if he seduced her. Usually, Arcia ignores him because she is like an innocent child who still doesn't know many things. But the protagonist doesn't know if he can stand it for long. Michael suggests that he have a wedding ceremony. That way, no one will have the courage to flirt with Arcia. Hours later, the protagonist walks through the castle of Arcia. The last conversation he had with the first prince is still present in his mind. Michael said that in this case it would be better to have a wedding. After all, they were already engaged. The protagonist is hesitant because he thinks it is a very important step in his life. In addition, the engagement is fake. Arcia is just a support of Archduke Lucas's legacy. He knows that the girl will not hesitate to marry him because she would do everything that was asked. But Adrian does not want to impose it on her. At that moment, Arcia was walking through his new county when he noticed the presence of the protagonist and went to him. The romantic mood is short-lived because Adrian notices the bodies of several knights on the ground. Apparently, Arcia won the fight. Suddenly, Catherine approaches them completely agitated, and the protagonist asks what happened. She says in a trembling voice that the second prince has arrived in the county of Arcia and sent someone to find her. Adrian asks if this guy has gone crazy. Arcia confesses that Prince Luke has a mischievous look at her, so he asks Catherine to send him away. The maid doesn't know what to do. Suddenly, a knight comes to them and greets Arcia gently, but he is startled when he meets Adrian. The protagonist mockingly asks if the man didn't expect to see him next to his fiancée. A strange atmosphere settles in that place. The knight composes himself and removes a bouquet from the secondary space artifact, then hands it to Arcia while saying that Luke invited her to a meal. The girl seems enchanted by the flowers. The protagonist throws the bouquet into his secondary space. Everyone is silent. Arcia asks if Adrian can go to the meeting too. The knight replies that Luke invited only the girl. The girl then replies that he won't, and the man tries to convince her. Suddenly, Adrian asks what family he is from. The knight stutters, asks why he wants to know that. The protagonist replies that to become a knight of the royal family, he must have some kind of support. He wants to know who his family is because he likes to cause destruction. Adrian asks if the knight hasn't seen the latest news. Maybe his parents could be eliminated. The knight is in shock at that threat and says that Adrian is being very rude. He only came by order of his highness. The protagonist replies that he will no longer stand by when they make unpleasant offers to his fiancée. He asks the knight to pass this information on to his highness and remind him that Arcia already has a fiancée. Adrian adds that he will not allow future offers. The scene changes to minutes later. Luke screams in surprise, asking if Adrian said that. The knight confirms that he initially thought it was a joke, but Adrian's eyes showed that he was serious. The The second prince assumes that the protagonist misunderstood the intention of the invitation. Douglas suggests that Luke back down because it won't be good to face Adrian. He understands that the second prince is in love with this woman, but it will be easier to win her over when he takes the throne. Luke agreed to this idea and said he would do it, but he won't forget to teach Adrian a lesson before. Now the second prince has found one more reason to win the succession. He will definitely do anything to get Arshia's heart. A few days later, the protagonist managed to pay off the debt he had with the Empire. Thanks to the 4 counties that lost the battle, Adrian took money from them, paintings and precious stones. The protagonist stole anything that had value in those territories, but there is something more valuable that he found in all this, a relic called the Celestial Sword. The sword is made of orichalcum, a rare mineral that is only produced in minimal quantities in the sacred land of Everhill, about 500 grams per year. One of them is worth as much as a flying fortress. Adrian was already thinking of visiting the sacred land. Now he has found a reason to do it. But before he needs to do one thing, the protagonist entered Chronicle after so many days of inactivity. Arshia defeats the demonic boss, and Adrian is happy to see this because he found the opponent very similar to the second prince. Finally, he burned the enemy with great flames. Another boss was defeated. In the following days, the protagonist was so busy with work that he was only able to play less than 3 hours a day. He almost didn't reach level 205, so Adrian decided to focus on leveling up. So he left the most important matters to his advisors, then used a clone of Arshia in reality, and gave her magic glasses to recruit talents. During the exploration in Archduke Lucas's tower, the real Arshia receives the information from her clone that a high-level talent has been found. Adrian tells him to recruit, and Arshia decides to leave it to his assistant. He questions what the talent is, and she says that it is divine power. Arshia adds that the person also has a unique characteristic of the nature of a saint. The protagonist screams in surprise. Arshia goes back to the real world and interviews the talented person. She is a convenience store clerk. The colleague is scared by those people dressed in black at her work, while the commoner named Everil Barnett is calm. The girl is only 15 years old and her talent called divine power is very high, in addition to having the nature of a saint. In Rondell, people only believe in one god and one religion. The doctrine of this one god is Sepianism. The seat of Sepianism is located in the sacred land of Everhill. The country is so important that not even the Brigham Empire would dare to invade. The 3 rulers of the sacred land are the Holy King, the Holy One, and the Holy One. The saintly king oversees the general administration of the church. The saint takes care of the army and the holy knights, and the saint supervises all the priests who perform divine miracles in the world. Later, Arshia returned to take the young master to the talent hall, where Everil was taken by Eric. At that moment, Adrian enters the palace and finds the girl. He touches her hand while greeting her. The protagonist receives some information about Everil before coming to meet her. It seems that Commoner worked in a convenience store due to the family's conditions. He thanks Arshia for the choice. After that, they sit down to talk. Everil said that her dream was to become an administrative employee. But Adrian ends her joy by saying that her talents are not good for this field. He says that the girl has an incredible nature and could easily aim for the position of saint. Eric asks surprised if he is serious. Just potential is not enough to be a saint. The saintly king was elected by the blood tie of the royal family. But the saint is chosen by God's choice every 2 years, regardless of their status. In the competition to select the saint, it is necessary to perform well and stand out before God. But Adrian thinks he shouldn't stand still now that he has found someone so talented. He reveals that he researched and found out that the contest to elect a new saint and a new saint will be held soon. So he plans to give his full support to Miss Everil to become a saint. The girl is surprised and screams that she thinks it is impossible. The protagonist replies that it is not impossible. 7 out of 10 saints used to be commoners. It certainly does not happen overnight. It requires effort and will on her part as well. Everil must learn many things before the competition, including etiquette, theology, and divine magic. To convince her, the protagonist plans to give a down payment of 200 million and a monthly salary of 500 million. Although the value seems great, it would not be a waste even if Adrian gave her 10 or 100 times more, because creating a saint only with his own hands would give the protagonist great power. Now Adrian tries to convince her that priestess is also a great profession. Eric gives his word that the young master is someone reliable. The protagonist brought Eric to help him in the interview, but it seems that he made the perfect choice in bringing him. Eric has traits and political talent. Maybe he and Everil are a perfect match. The protagonist tells the girl that she doesn't have to worry because she can stay at the palace. Eric will be in the role of taking care of her. The knight agrees. Adrian is happy with the duo he has chosen. While Eric and Everil adapted to their new tasks, Adrian and Arshia entered the game again. This time the boss was a giant goblin. The protagonist focused on leveling up. He entered the game whenever he had free time. But even after so much effort, he only managed to reach level 208. The pace is very slow. Arshia and Crowe are helping a lot. The only problem is that the protagonist is meeting a lot of players quite often. He decides to leave the game before getting into trouble. But before that happens, someone screams. A player approaches and asks where the protagonist got this Black Eagle support. She really wanted to get one. Adrian quickly responds that he is not a support. The black eagle is a wild animal that was tamed. After that, he decides to leave. The player understands and goes back to his group. Adrian is tired of finding these players. He thinks if it would be too expensive to buy the production company of Chronicle Online, Adrian considers buying the game. But he gives up when he sees the value. Currently, Chronicle Online costs 102 trillion. He thinks about what to do now. The protagonist did not want to spend the last wish of the administrator, so he decides to find an efficient way to level up without meeting other users of the game. The only alternative that comes to his mind is to monopolize hunting grounds. Meanwhile, at the Black Dragon Guild office, some players are gathered to talk about the time limit for access to the game. They notice that a lot has changed. Not so long ago, even cash transactions for items were blocked. Now you will have to pay 10 times the fine if you are caught selling items indirectly to a country. The guild leader agrees that it is getting harder and harder to play. At this point, she is informed that a mage above level 200 is there to talk to her. It seems that he wants to make an offer. The leader of the Black Dragon Guild thinks it is a waste of time and tells the player to tell him to leave. But the player encourages the leader to find this wizard because she thinks it will be important. After all, he brought 10 decathlon hearts as a gift. The player adds that this wizard is equipped with the best hybrid equipment that can be used at level 200. All the guild members look at the girl with surprised faces. Decathlon was very expensive. The player says that honestly, this wizard appears to be a user of the highest rank. His skills and equipment prove it. These words were enough for the leader to let the protagonist into her office. Arshia accompanies Adrian and introduces herself with a false name. She says her name is Mingi. The leader says it is a peculiar nickname. Then introduces herself as Penny. She can't help but notice that everything Adrian wears is actually very expensive. Penny is direct and asks what brings him here. The protagonist says he would like to rent the hunting grounds that the Black Dragon Guild is monopolizing. Penny is surprised because she has never heard such a proposal before. Adrian goes on to say that he intended to block other users from accessing the hunting grounds, as Penny does in the Black Dragon Guild. The leader thinks this is silly, because in that case the guild will not be able to use the field either. Adrian is willing to convince her, and so he offers to pay 5 times the total profit she would earn in that hunting ground. Penny is interested in the offer and asks which hunting area he wants to monopolize. The protagonist says he wants Coultern's Chimera Dungeon. The leader is shocked and says that it is impossible. More than 200 people use this Chimera Dungeon per day. Probably Adrian will have to pay billions for the rent of the field. The protagonist says that it is no problem and asks Penny to completely block the entry of other users. The woman asks him why he wants this dungeon so much. She thinks there is some special item in that place or is related to some kind of hidden quest. Adrian replies that he is doing it because he wants to level up. Penny thinks it is strange that he is willing to spend 50 million items a day just to level up without any specific purpose. The protagonist says that he just wants to level up without anyone getting in the way. So he intends to pay the money up front or trade currencies online. Penny's eyes lit up when he heard this, and she asked how long he wanted to rent. Adrian said he would like to rent the field for a month, but if he thinks the growth rate is slow, he will rent another of his hunting grounds. His goal is to keep renting until he reaches the maximum level. Penny does not hide the happiness on her face. She knows that she will make a lot of money from the protagonist and sends the girls of the guild to prepare a good tea. Now Adrian is treated very well. The Black Dragon Guild will receive 350 million per week. At this point, members try to remove players who are fighting in the Chimera Dungeon. Sometime later, Adrian defeats a mountain of monsters. In a short time, he reaches level 220. The protagonist realizes that in this place his level rises much faster. Archia says that the speed of experience acquisition has doubled compared to before. Adrian happily says that it seems that he will reach level 250 much faster than he expected. Later, the pair leave the game and attend a meeting about the selection that will be held in the Sacred Land. Adrian is warned that the test will take place sooner than expected. He is not so happy about it because he thought he would reach the required level before sending Everil to the test. The contest for the selection of Saints and Saints was advanced more than planned. Pesius says that it will probably be held in the second half of next year, but they are looking for a candidate for this month. The protagonist says that it really is a little sudden, but this situation is not so bad either because the number of rival candidates may decrease as the dispute progresses more quickly. Now they just need to create a winning strategy for Everil to stand out. For this, the protagonist decides to turn Everil into a candidate for Saint who represents the Reinhardt Kingdom. He has already sent a letter to the Royal Empire. Tomorrow, an Archbishop of the Kingdom of Reinhardt will visit his territory, and he will receive it together with Everil. Pesius asks if Adrian is planning to lure the Archbishop of the Kingdom first. The protagonist replies yes, and also intends to ask the royal family for support after he does so. Pesius is doubtful if the girl will move according to his plans. Adrian thinks so because Eric can take care of Everil's thoughts without any problems. Pesius says that he is very cunning and shows Everil's competitors. The first is Grace Highelven, a supreme elementalist of the Seventh Circle. The second is Evelyn Francis, an aura expert. The third is a commoner named Judy Esther. The protagonist realizes that candidate 3 is the same as Everil. The difference is that Judy Esther is being supported by Olivia Riverdale. The protagonist is a little worried because even if he excludes the sponsors of the 3 girls, they will remain more notable than Everil. For a moment, Adrian felt like giving up his goal, but he thinks it's too early to surrender, so he prefers to believe in the potential that Everil has. He thinks he will draw a lot of attention when they find out that he is the sponsor of the new Saint of the Holy Land. A few hours later, the protagonist leaves the office saying that his work is over, and now he is going to enter the game. Perseus asks him to wait a while and asks how much the boy donated to the archdiocese. As far as he knows, the Archbishop of Reinhardt's kingdom is not a man who would accept to move out of nowhere. Adrian just smiles. Meanwhile, in the Riverdale Empire, one of the friends tells Olivia that Marcus Adrian Lawrence is Everil Barnett's sponsor. He also made a large donation of 10 trillion. The girl is surprised and says that her disciple is very interesting. The knights find Olivia's smile sinister. The next day arrives, Archbishop Fred meets with Adrian and is delighted that Everil can already use divine magic so well. He believes that she will become the new saint. Adrian tells the Archbishop that he wants to talk something with him. Judy's side Esther suggested forming an alliance during the contest. To be exact, this request is from his sponsor, Olivia Riverdale. It was not Judy Esther herself who made the request. The Archbishop suggests considering the offer because Miss Esther is a great candidate. But first it would be better to increase the possibility of Miss Everil being selected. Then they can focus on competing with Miss Esther. After all, it seems that Riverdale does not want to cause confusion with a competitor. The Archbishop thought that the suggestion came from Olivia, but the truth is that it was the protagonist himself who suggested the formation of the alliance. He prefers to hide this fact. What remains now is to bring the royal family to his side. The request reached the second prince. Luke thinks it's a great idea because the Reinhardt Empire will benefit if a saint is born in its territory. So he says he will convince his father to accept the proposal. The protagonist thanks him. He knew Luke wouldn't refuse. Adrian decides to leave after the proposal, but Luke asked him to wait and asked if he heard the latest news. Marquis Otis's daughter and Count Akers have disappeared. The protagonist widens his eyes in surprise. On the other hand, Luke is happy with the news because Otis and Akers supported the first prince. Now this disappearance resulted in a fall to Michael's support. Adrian met Michelle a short time ago and could see that she was extremely intelligent. Count Akers was the second greatest master aura after Marquis Vincent. This disappearance makes no sense, Luke says. He was also surprised. The news of the disappearance arrived a few hours ago. Adrian pretends that he is happy that the first prince's support has weakened. But inside he curses that so many bad things are happening right when he should focus on the contest of saints. The first thing the protagonist does is run to the first prince. It is clear from his face that he is desperate. Michael realizes that Adrian has heard the latest news and tells him to sit down. The first prince explains that Marquis Otis and Count Akers are cousins of the same maternal family, so the two are practically brothers and are very close. Adrian understands that the two also had the same political opinions. Michael replies yes, and says that Akers loves Lady Michelle as if she were his own sister, and he offered to be a guard when he learned that she was going on vacation alone. Adrian assumes that something bad happened during this trip. Michael replies that he thinks the same. The problem is that the destination of Michelle's trip is the place where tensions are high with the Brigham Empire. She went to the Fruus Republic. Adrian is in shock and wonders why she would go to such a dangerous place. Michelle and Akers practically committed an act against their own lives. The first prince has a theory of what happened. Michelle is a hardcore fan of Archduke Lucas and was seriously committed to finding out his fate. But the fate was discovered in the Fruus Republic. Apparently the girl could not recognize this fact, and it is said that she planned the vacation impulsively to find out the truth behind this fate. This was the theory that the protagonist feared, because he was the one who created a false destiny and handed over the Fruus Republic. Michael is determined to find his allies, so he officially requested their extradition through the official diplomatic lines and secretly sent special forces together with the National Intelligence Service. The protagonist was surprised anyone would let the matter resolve itself. But Michael is willing to lose all support to find Michelle and Akers. Adrian decides not to stand still and says that he is going to the Fruus Republic to rescue those two. The first prince asks if he is sure. The protagonist thinks it is the most appropriate to act secretly, so he would like to ask Michael to clean things up so that his identity is not revealed. The first prince knows that he cannot stop him, then says that he will send the place where they were last sighted, along with the places where they are probably staying now. Michael trusts that Adrian can solve this and says that he will leave these two in his hands. The scene changes to Michelle and Akers. Both are running away from magical attacks. Akers manages to protect her from the explosion, and they are thrown away. Michelle realizes that her guard is badly hurt. The pursuers are avant-garde men with magic weapons. They warn the two to stop running. Akers tries to explain that they are just tourists, with no intention of causing trouble in their country. The vanguard replies that the sentence was given the moment Michelle approached them. The girl starts crying and apologizes to her uncle for it. Akers whispers to her to run to the left siege as soon as he tells her to. She will be able to use the teleportation spell if she can move approximately 300 meters. Michelle is afraid to leave him behind. Akers smiles, saying that he can run away alone without her. So the girl should not worry. Suddenly, Akers shouts for Michelle to run. The girl obeys the order and goes the opposite way. Akers tries to knock down the vanguardists with his sword. He tries to draw attention to himself so that Michelle runs away. With this, Akers ends up not noticing the knight who jumps on him with the sword. The man is startled when suddenly the enemy is mortally struck by magic. Akers looks at those responsible for the attack and is surprised.